What's up, everybody? We got another great podcast for you today. We have Ron St. Pierre. He's an OG in the business, OG in the hobby. So you guys got to stay tuned for this one. We're going Herp House Rock on him right now. Stay tuned. Was that a lot?
Okay. Hell of an intro. Didn't feel forced at all.
Herp House Rock on your ass. That's good.
But okay, Ron. I personally know your name coming up in the industry doing boas since the early 2000s. You have your name tagged on the first motley boa that ever came in the country, and of course the blood boa. I'd love to hear more about the early days, some of the importing, maybe some of the stuff that you came across. And, you said you got in the hobby about 30 years ago. I'd also like to hear about, what got you going in it. If there was somebody else that influenced you, if you just simply saw this developing into a big hobby and wanted to be a part of it, or lay it on us, however you want.
I mean, actually, so I'm 51 now, so I really started, I've been doing this since I was a little kid. I grew up in Miami, and from the time I was real little, I used to, spend all my day outside catching anoles and little lizards and bugs and whatever I could find I lived in like the inner city almost, so we didn't have much in our yard, but we did have stuff, and I used to find what I could. And so I've been pretty much doing this forever. And then right around the time I was like 14, I figured out that if I so my grandmother had all these old phone books in her house, like going back to the 40s. And one day I was just thumbing through one of them from I think it was from the mid 50s. And I noticed that there were these advertisements in them there were these addresses of where reptile importers used to be. Mm-hmm. And I got to thinking, I wonder if they lost stuff. If their stuff got loose, even though they'd been long gone from those areas. So one of them was pretty close to my house where I live. So I got on my bike and got a few friends, and we rode over to this rundown warehouse section where this place used to be in the 50s and 60s. And there was shit everywhere. There was iguanas and red-headed agamas. And that same day we caught a whole bunch of Honduran wood turtles. They were just walking around these fields around these warehouses. So
that's such a great idea.
That really got the ball rolling. And then I started thinking, well, if this place has stuff and Miami's had a long history of importation, there's probably a lot of stuff. And so this was like in 82 or so when I figured that out. And there was a point where me and a bunch of my friends would get on a whole bunch of metro buses, like different ones, and get transfers and go like 15, 20 miles from where we lived through the bus system to these old warehouse places where these reptile places used to be. And I found all kind of stuff. And eventually it just kept morphing, from beyond that. When I was 8 years old, my parents bought me my first lizard because I wouldn't leave them alone. My mom didn't want me to have that stuff, but eventually they gave in and they took me to this place called The Shed, which is a pretty legendary place as far as it was like the big reptile import facility. And I'll never forget it because they had tanks full of giant sun gazers, and they had these huge monitor lizards, and I mean, blue-tongued skinks, they had all this amazing stuff, all stuff that I had only ever saw in books and used to dream about. It was just, but what did I end up walking out of there with? My parents bought me a Cuban anole. So, because all the other stuff was like, even at the time, sun gazers weren't cheap, and they were just looking to get me a little pet. So, but it was cool. It really got us started. And then I spent most of my teenage years running around Miami and catching stuff. And by the time I was 16, I was catching so much stuff, and I was making so much money at it just by selling it. I used to sell to Zoological Imports, which is Mario Tabro's. He's kind of infamous, but he was always really good to me, and he bought pretty much everything I brought into that place. So, I sold a lot of stuff to him, and by that time I was making a check every week of just going out catching lizards that I just said, fuck it. I dropped out of school and I started doing it full time. I mean, that's all I did. And then over the years, I started breeding stuff in like 88, 87. I got some Burmese pythons and I bred those. And, and at the time I was still, because I was a commercial collector and I only did invasive species. So I didn't really, I did occasionally, like in the wintertime when that stuff kind of dried up, I would hit basically the roofers in Miami used to take and dump the roofing tiles out in these, abandoned fields. And I discovered that place is like amazing to catch corn snakes, because you literally can take apart a roof tar pile. And if it's in the wintertime, there were times where you'd pull 15, 20 corn snakes out of one of these things. And they were in the city. They were surrounded by, buildings, and it wasn't like out in the Everglades or anything. This was right in the city. So I would do that in the wintertime to keep my cash flow running. And that at the time, that was a thing. The market was just really people were starting to buy corn snakes to breed. And so you could, everybody was buying up stock for their breeding stuff. So it was the right place at the right time. And I had access to all these Miami phase corns, which were the silver ones that everybody wanted. And they were smaller. You never really found them much above 3 feet. It's probably some sort of adaptation because they lived inside the city limits and not, because if you went out, outside of Miami, out in the homestead, you could catch 4, 5, 6 footers, and they were different though. They were large and much more robust. The ones in the city primarily fed on anoles, so they stayed small. So it could be just access to food is why they stayed that way. But so anyway, yeah, I did that, and it just kept going. Eventually, I started catching night anoles commercially, and did that hardcore for a long time, and started building breeding stock. And that's pretty much how it ended up. I don't know what happened to him, but
he's in an abandoned bowling alley, and because he gets reception there, and he doesn't really at his house, and so there's always funny things happening in the parking lot.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to walk away. There was just a lizard ran across the parking lot. I wanted to make sure it was a fence lizard, not anything really cool, so I just wanted to check.
That's great.
That's cool.
Priorities, man. Priorities.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's great. That was great.
No, I'm saying you have the right priorities. You're good.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron.
Yeah.
So you were out collecting reptiles to sell them to pet shops and to places like that. We had somebody else on the show as well that was down that area. And was it like a big group of people that you kind of knew everybody that was catching and collecting, or was it kind of just it's just me, or maybe you and a friend or something like that, or was it like a tight-knit community? Or
yeah, I mean, Miami always was that. We all knew each other. We all hung out at different reptile places. I think you're probably talking about Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, me and Greg met later on. My cousin actually married his best friend.
Oh.
So at that point, she was like, "Oh yeah, her husband's friend was into reptiles," so that's how I met him, and then we started hanging out. Him and I for a long time. We lived like only a few miles from each other, and
Wow.
I'm actually the one that told him about going to Strictly Reptiles and hand picking stuff, because I started doing. That's how I got the blood boas, not from Strictly, but from another importer.
Yeah.
In the late 80s, I figured out that I started really holding back breeding stock for my own. So I was amassing, while I was catching local stuff and selling it, a lot of it I was trading for stuff that I wanted for myself. So I started building up colonies of basilisks and tegus at the time and all that, and boa constrictor. And since I was pretty much at all these import facilities about 3 or 4 times a week, because I was supplying them all at that point with anoles basically, it gave me access to everything, and I got to know them all real well. And they would call me when a shipment was coming in, and so I would be first one there, as and would go through the shipments with them as they unpacked them. So I started finding all kind of ridiculous stuff. I got a lot of gravid stuff. I got a lot of mutations. At one point I was just pulling so many ball python and potential boa mutations out of these shipments that it was just insane. I mean, I could pretty much guarantee if the shipment came in and had several hundred to several thousand animals, you could pretty much walk out of there every time with 10 to 50 things that were potentially something special.
Wow.
So, and that's how I found the blood boas. It was actually Brian Blackwood, who was at the time he was on his own, but he was an importer along with this guy named Richard Stubbs, which is a fairly well-known Miami importer, and they were bringing in stuff. And one day I went over there to drop off some night anoles to him, and they had just gotten a shipment from El Salvador. And I actually had no interest in that because they were Central American boas, and at the time everybody hated them and nobody wanted them. Oh, they're too small. Oh, they suck. They're mean. That was the thinking at the time. But my ex-wife wouldn't she's like, no, we got to go through that and just see. And I was like, no, I just want to get the hell out of here. But she insisted. And so we did. And the freaking first bag I opened, it was a bright red boa constrictor. And I was like, I pulled it out. And I was like, all right, I'm definitely taking this one. And then I opened another bag, and there was 3 more in this pile of boas. So I got 4 that day, blood boas. It happened to be 2.2.
Wow.
In the same shipment, I got 3 black-tailed anathoristic boas and 3 that I believe now were probably T-positive albinos. But at the time, I wasn't really familiar with that. They were really bright, and in retrospect, I've gone back and looked at old photos I had of them, and it's pretty clear those were T-positives. They could have been like super hypo, or not super hypo, but hypos, just really good ones. But they were either hypos or T-positives. They were something like that. All that out of one shipment of, I think there was 300 boas.
Wow.
So
That's gotta be so cool.
Yeah, it was a good day, and I paid like $50 a piece for these things.
That's what I was just about to ask. Were the guys there like, it's fine, like they don't care what you're picking up, or
I mean, you would pay a little bit of a premium for quote unquote pretty stuff. They used to a lot of those guys had a habit of calling everything clowns. So if it was really nice, they call it a clown boa, and they throw them all in these boxes. And so you go in there, and there would be these special boxes pulled aside that had clown stuff in them. That was just brightly colored mutations and shit like that. So, and they only wanted like maybe twice what the stuff sold for. So if it was a $25 boa, it was $50. And so I used to buy that stuff and started, working out whether or not it was whether it was actually something, whether it was just a pretty version, natural variation. And that really, it snowballed ever since from that point. That was the point really where, it took a few years to produce the blood boas, and then once we basically bred the bloods immediately because I had 2.2, and so it took like 3 years, and then we bred them, and then out popped 100% blood boas. So I was like, okay, well, we figured this out. This is,
And what year was that?
I want to say it had to be 90 or 90. It was sometime between 90 and 92. It was definitely pre-Hurricane Andrew, but I can't remember exactly what year that was. I think it was 90 actually. I'm trying to remember, but anyway.
Now, would that have been the first established morph in boa constrictors, or was the albino boa already on the scene at that point?
I think the albino boa was already out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I remember seeing Pete call at the Daytona show, which was in Orlando at the time. With the albino boas there, because I used to go and drool over that and think, oh man, one day, but they were just so, they're very expensive, so they were out of my price range. And actually, no, you know what? When I produced the blood boas, Jeff G had already been producing the hypo boas, it was hypo. He was calling his hypos, and then Rich Eiley later had the salmon boas. But yeah, all those they were all around the same time. I definitely did not have the first boa morph. Maybe Central American boa morphs produced. Possibly, but it's largely irrelevant at the time. And again, the only reason that I was trying to say, how do I put that? So for years, I produced blood boas, and literally no one wanted them. A handful of guys were smart enough to see, oh, it's a small boa. This is a good thing, and it can probably be used to, to make the hypo version, which should be really amazing, or the albino version. Some of those guys did see that and did pick them up, but I was only trying to get like $2,000 a piece for them at the time, and that was pretty low for a new morph, considering what the albinos and stuff were. And I couldn't sell them, and for 10 years I tried to get the project out there, and I always heard the same thing. Oh, it's Central American. If they were Colombians, it'd be different, and I didn't want to hybridize them. So I just, at the time, everybody was like super hardcore purists. So I was following suit with that, and so in like the mid 2000s, early 2000s, I eventually just gave up and sold the project off, and then I kind of dropped out. I burned out. And I was still producing lots of lizards and everything and I was still doing my thing, but I really wasn't going to shows. I was kind of just, being quiet and staying off to myself. And then like 4 or 5 years after I sold that project, I walked into a Daytona show and I saw blood boas for $10,000. And I was like, what the hell happened? They actually went up after I got out of them. And, but realistically, what happened was the market finally hit that point. Everybody started realizing, well, the blood boa will fit in a CV70 comfortably pretty much forever because they stay really small. Mm-hmm. And whereas, other boas get much larger and require more space. So that, coupled with the fact that they started producing the albino and hypo versions, and people saw how amazing those were, that really pumped that project up. So it was just a case of I was way too early on that, and I'm terrible clearly at marketing, so I should just stay the hell out of that. So Heather does that, and I belong in a basement toiling away. That's pretty much
when you bred those, I know that a lot of times back in the day, people didn't really have a good idea on how to breed certain animals. Like there wasn't techniques or anything. They just kind of put them together and let them live together and see what happens. What was your technique? Like, were you trying to figure it out, or did you have ideas like from other people that maybe bred?
I mean, honestly, my method pretty much, and at this point I've bred north of, I don't even know how many different species. My interests are very broad, so I've worked with everything from big snakes to colubrids to tree frogs and more lizards than I can even remember. But I've produced now somewhere north of 100, 200 species. I can't even keep track of them all. But I always use the same basic method. I tend to set up things in pairs or in small groups in large enclosures, and then I just turn the dials as I see things. I just watch them, and as I see something going on, then I react to that, and it's usually just minor things. I don't really I don't like method breeding personally. I mean, I see why it works, but like you take this one, they have it as separate, and you introduce it to that and all that. Partly because probably I just get too distracted by other things, and I'm afraid I'm going to miss the timing on stuff like that. So I just found so basically with those boas, I just kept them in pairs. I separate to feed and then put them back together and left them there. And that's what I did with all the snakes I've ever bred for the most part. I mean, I bred tons of colubrids that at the time everybody said, oh no, you have to hibernate them like California king snakes and stuff like that. I was producing all that without ever cooling them down, just in a little unair conditioned back room in Miami. Had no AC, so it was subject to whatever the temperatures were. So in the summertime, it was in the 90s during the day, but even in the wintertime, most days it was 80 degrees in that room. It would drop down at night maybe to 65 or something, but certainly wasn't, put them in a cooler. And I produced a ton of colubrids that way.
Wow.
So, and it's just there's so many ways to do this. I found over the years that, I mean, a lot of the methods that we think are very rigid really are not. It's just they work for you, but some other guy could try to copy it, which I've had plenty of people try to copy what I do with some of these lizards and just totally fail. It's really just about finding whatever method works well with your personality, and then it's just small controlled dials. I just completely obliterated all every time I think I have a formula that's like, oh, this is the formula, then I find out some other guy in someplace else is doing it totally different than the way I'm doing, and doing as well and sometimes better than what I'm doing. So I'm never happy with anything. I've rebuilt. I just produced the first T-negative albino night anole. I've been working on that project since 2014. So it took me 6 freaking years to get this project off the ground, but I literally have torn down and rebuilt the system I built for them 2 to 3 times a year for the last 6 years, because every time I get something where I think, okay, this is exactly how I want it, then I'm like, oh, this sucks, and tear the whole thing down and throw it out. And I finally found a system that fulfills everything that I expect out of it, and it's working better than anything I've ever done. So I now have a system that finally works for me. But then I look at what there are other guys that are breeding some of these anoles that they do it totally different. And I tried to actually copy one of these guys, and I couldn't get it to work at all. It was just a miserable failure. So, but I found my own system that works well with the place that I'm at. And plus I like to keep stuff outside. I hate fucking cleaning cages. So if you can get everything outside and these big enclosures, and then you just add food and collect eggs, and I like that method. That's
that sounds great.
Yeah. The whole I try to avoid keeping stuff inside as much as humanly possible. The only thing actually we have inside right now really are crested geckos, and only because we're working on those high-end projects, the lily white and the axanthic. But if I wasn't working on them, they wouldn't even be here. That's kind of a thing. Because I can't get them outside here. If I put them outside here, they'll die. It's just too hot. So I don't know. That's pretty much the method. And I think we totally got sidetracked and went off on
No.
Anyway, so yeah, so I'm mostly an outdoor guy. I like working outside. I try to keep as much. We have a ton of shit here. It's all in these huge outdoor enclosures. And I like it's just me and Heather. We have no employees. I've never had employees. I just like doing it all myself, from the entire thing, from the very bottom to the very top. I want it to be, when I produce something, I want to feel like I did this and I didn't have another guy doing it for me. So and because of that kind of limits to how much you can actually control. But if you got the stuff outside, man, one guy can handle a lot of stuff in a very small amount of time. So now that there's 2 of us, we both work similar ways. Actually, she probably works a lot harder than I do, but we were able to take on a lot more stuff, and we had a lot of cool. I pretty much have every lizard project I've ever wanted to work with right now. So,
I'm looking through your page, and you have quite the collection of lizards, I'll say.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 investors that have allowed me to do this, but yeah, they pretty much hooked me up with that. It's every bucket list animal I've ever had, and nice groups of each one. The only thing I don't have a lot of yet are Sanzinia. I've only picked up 1 or 2 here or there, which that's a snake that does amazingly well outdoors here, and is one that I've always wanted to work with on some sort of level. I've loved those since I was a little kid. So.
Yeah, I go so many different directions with you. So you were saying you've produced somewhere between 100 to 200 different species. Is there any species you're working with right now that you've yet to produce?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've only picked up the lace monitors and the Spencers within the last year. Those are 2 animals I've never produced. I've produced quite a few Varanids in the past, but not these particular. These were ones I've always wanted. Always were way out of my ability to afford. And then a couple of collections went up for sale of animals that people had got from Don Church and from Brian Waterloo, and had raised up these babies, and they were all adults now. And so I was able to put together a couple of investors to purchase these things. And so I'm pretty sure I have a gravid lace right now, one of them, and I have 2 other females that are looking like possibly Spencers are probably going to be another year. They're full adults, but I got them in their off season, and they're getting adjusted now to these. We built them these enormous outdoor enclosures, so they've never lived outside before, so now they're getting sunlight, and they're in these huge cages. And so I don't expect to get anything from them for next year, but those are two that I've never produced I'm throwing everything I have at that. So.
Gravid lace monitors. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now, did you originate the T-negative anole project, or is that something that somebody else was working with first?
No. So basically in 2013, the first T-positive albino was caught by a hunter down there. That's actually kind of a funny story. This hunter down in Miami that knew me, sort of, sends me this picture. I get a text photo of this tiny little bright yellow Cuban anole. He's like, I just caught this on a tree, and I won $1,000 for it. And I was like, man, nobody gonna give a shit about this. This is another blood ball all over again, where I'll do the work and spend years, and no one will care. So I turned it down. But I took the photo. I asked if I could throw it up on Facebook, and I thought, for shits and giggles, people will dig this. So I threw it on my Facebook page, and then I went outside to go to work for the day. And I left my phone in the house at the time because it needed to be charged. So I come in about 2 hours later to check my phone, and the whole thing is filled with messages. I was like, what the fuck is this? So, sorry. I didn't.
You're good.
So anyway, all right, cool. Anyway, I started looking at who was sending me these messages, and it was like a who's who in the reptile industry, inquiring about that anole. So then I was like, shit, I just outed it. Now everybody knows. And so I called the guy back, and I'm like, I'll take it. So I lived 3 hours from Miami at the time. I must have done that drive in about 2 hours. I immediately went straight to the bank, withdrew the cash, got in my car, drove 3 hours south at breakneck speed. And so this kid texted me the address, and he's like, I'm going to meet you over here. So I was like, all right. So I go to this place, and it's a freaking, it was like a really bad neighborhood, and there were like all these guys out drinking all over the road, like in front of the 7-Eleven, and he wanted me to meet him there. And I swear there was people selling crack next to that. It was like one of those, and I'm like, man, I'm bringing this guy cash, and it was a drug hole in southern Miami. And I was like, yeah, this is bad. So I'm driving around, I'm looking for this guy. Everybody's staring at me and shit because they knew I wasn't supposed to be there. And I see this kid standing in a tree holding this dirty McDonald's bag in his hand. So I pull up. I'd never seen the kid in person before, and I'm like, I'm Ron St. Pierre. I'm here to buy. He's like, oh yeah, man, I got it. And he runs up to my car window and hands me this baggie, and I'm thinking, man, if there's cops watching this, they're gonna think I'm buying drugs. This whole thing is just gonna go terribly. He comes up to my car. He hands me this absolutely filthy McDonald's bag. I open it up, and there's a half-dead albino anole in there. And I was just like, I already did this. So I handed in the cash, and I got the hell out of there. I came home. So on the way back, I was so afraid that anole wasn't going to make it. As soon as I got out of there and I got to some place where I didn't think I was going to get carjacked, I went into a Burger King and took the anole and gave it some water in the sink in there, and then it started to look a little bit better. It was super dehydrated. So I got it home, set it up. A year later, I bred it to some just normal wild-caught females and produced, I think I got 14 or 15 pets. And then I raised those up in the following year. So I was able to get the T-positive albino anoles into production pretty fast. By 2 years after I got the first one, I was already producing those.
Nice.
And I sold a few of those around. They're pretty cool. They're bright yellow. They're pretty much a standard, they kind of look like a T-positive albino ball python. They're kind of that gold and yellow. But in 2014, this kid walked out in his backyard and albino, true albino. And then called Underground Reptiles because he lived right down the street from there and sold it to them. but I've known them forever. So they called me up and they said they had this thing. That one I did not get cheap. I basically traded 300 bearded dragons for it, 300 baby bearded dragons, which, depending on how you do the math, is a substantial amount of money for this. But I did not want anybody else to have it. They knew I didn't want anybody else to have it. They knew I wanted it because I was already working on the T positive and I wanted to continue to go with it. So I gave them 300 bearded dragons for this tiny little thing. And 6 years later, I finally produced them. But yeah, so I've produced the first T positives and the first T negatives now. And that's a project that I think right now I've got a lot of interest in it from like really hardcore, reptile guys. They see that this could be a thing eventually, because it turns out that while wild caught anoles are big, nasty, bitey things, captive born ones are totally different. They're all tame. They'll eat right out of your hand. They're super smart. They don't bite. They're totally different animal. So, and I guess that in a lot of ways that's kind of similar. I remember the first crested geckos that were brought in, they were pretty evil, but nowadays, they're all pretty tame. So it's kind of the same thing. Once you get the domestication process begins, most of these things kind of lose that wild aggressive tendency. And maybe it's because we breed it out, because we tend to sell out. Everybody gets rid of the ones that are nippy and keeps the ones that are the best in most cases. So that could be what's going on. So maybe 6 or 8 years from now, maybe that project will be more of a mainstream thing. But for right now, it's just kind of this project that I'm dicking around with, trying to develop I have developed now a system that makes them producible reliably, which was a problem for me anyway.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, you know as well as we do, most species in the hobby, it takes a mutation to really make that species take off when it's not very popular. So you having two right now could be really big for those.
Yeah, I actually have a one that has piebalds, that has pieds, huge white pieds on it. And we have some solid blue ones.
Now we're talking.
Yeah, these guys down in Miami.
What's it take to invest in this? What are we talking about here?
I mean, when I actually haven't. I sold the first few T positive albinos that I did sell for basically $5,000, but it was almost all in trade. It was stupid high money. When we actually have these in production, they're going to be a lot less than that. They're still going to be expensive, but they're not going to be $5,000. They're not ball pythons, so we're going to put a realistic price on them, and but something that'll be worth. If you buy into that, you'll have a reasonably small, because I'm not a big fan personally of taking giant risks with you spend $20,000 on something, and by the time you produce it, it's the market, it goes down. It's usually worth maybe 10 to 15% of what you paid, and it makes it's just a little more chaotic, and people get pissed at that, and I really try to avoid that. I mean, I'm a guy who I bought a banana ball.
When did you buy one?
When they were $10,000, and 6 months later they were $1,000.
Yeah.
So I had watched them sit at that 50,000 price for so long, and I thought, man, this project is really holding its value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a rule up until that point. If it was a morph, I really wouldn't pay more than $2,000, $2,500 for it. And if it was a species, I had a $5,000 cap of what I would be willing to put out there, because I knew, if it's a species, it's relatively market safe as long as I can't import them.
Yeah.
And $2,500 is a risk that I can afford to throw away if on a morph, if the market crashes and they become absolutely worthless. I know that even if they're worth only $100 by the time I produce them, I'll be all right.
Yeah.
But the $10,000 on the ball pipe, on the coral or banana, whatever the hell it was. Yeah. That was the last time I did that too. It was the one time I broke the rule, and the one time that exactly why I had the rule happened to me. So I was like, all right, that's enough of that.
Well, to be fair, when that's actually the snake that kind of got me into ball pythons. I saw that selling for $25,000 each at a Daytona show, and I was like, Ryan, is this really, is this real life right now? And we bought our first banana at like $1,000, and we said it'll never go below $500.
Yep,
Here it
I
is.
thought that too. Now they're
Yeah.
$100.
Yeah, same as you. Not as crazy as you, but I had a deal going where I was getting one in trade. I was building display cases for a customer, and he was giving me a male. And the moment that we set the deal up, it was worth $4,000.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 6 weeks to get his order done. By the time it came in, they were $1,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, that just happened fast, all of us.
Yeah, that was. I don't think anything else has ever taken that kind of a descent. I mean, they went from here to there like within a span of a couple months, and
Yeah.
it was just. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not. At this point, doesn't really bother me. But I'm not gonna lie. That year, I was pretty freaking pissed. I was like, man, because I had bought those to try because the bearded dragon market was super soft at the time, which has been my primary cash cow. That's bearded dragons have what allow me to do shit like mess around with stuff that's harder to breed. So because they pay all the bills, they're easy to produce and they always sell. But that year and the years subsequent to it, that market was soft. There was people producing a couple 100,000 a year, and there were multiple people producing those kind of numbers. So they had that market really seized up, and so I'd lost a lot of my accounts. I was like, all right, well, I'll just do this ball python thing for a while because they're another one of those things that you can live off of because they're reliable. So I jumped into that, and then 6 months later, I sold them. I was like, man, I'm never doing that again. I should have just stuck with rode out the downtime because at this point, I'm really a lizard guy. I do mess with some snakes. I have Sanzinia, and I have some of the Mexican spilotes,
Oh, yeah.
stuff like that. But snakes I can keep outside. I keep them in big outdoor cages, and man, those spilotes are something else. It's that animal literally basks more than a lizard does. I mean, people told me, oh, they like it cool, and that's totally not my experience at all. I gave them the ability to be cool, and they told me to go fuck myself. So basically what happened was I set them up in these huge cages where they could be cool if they wanted to, and they could choose to be super warm if they wanted to. They always are in the heat. It can be blazing. They're similar to the Buranids in that respect. I've got them in one of the hottest parts of my yard now. They're doing amazing. They pound food. They come flying to the doors as soon as they see you to eat. They're always that thing. I've never seen a snake eat like that. They'll eat every day, and they don't get obese. Their metabolism is just ridiculous, and they're big and they're fast, and they're kind of fun. They're basically very lizard-like.
Are
Do you think
producing
that-
those?
I'm sorry.
I was just asking if you're producing those.
I hope they're big enough to go this year. I think that
Okay.
after winter cooling, I think we have a pretty good chance of producing those. I think Jason Hood just hatched some.
Yeah, but we were talking with him. He says it's pretty hit or miss. People don't really have it dialed in yet. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, and that's what I'm curious to see is if maybe it is maybe they need to be kept more like lizards than the typical snake setup in a rack. That may be what's hindering that. Because they bask like super hardcore. They are always sunning themselves. So,
Do you think that they eat more because they're hotter?
it's possible. I mean, for a long time we had trouble breeding Buranids, and Buranids, we used to all bash our heads against the wall as to why they were so hard to breed. You would get them to breed, but you get infertiles, you get all these problems. And it was basically a couple of things, but primarily it was improper nesting and heat. That we weren't getting them up to a sufficient operating temperature.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if that's what this animal is, because, like I said, mine have the ability to choose to be cool if they want to, and they do not choose it. They're always up in these huge branches. They have branches in the cool spot that are equal to the ones they have in the warm spot. They're one of the first things out in the morning, and they're out pretty much all day in the heat of the day, sunning themselves. Sometimes they'll go under for little periods of time, but most of the time they're out there in the full heat. So my experience with them has been pretty different than what I had heard from people that also work with them and were successful with them. So maybe it's in spite of it, or maybe it's, we'll have to see if I actually start breeding them. Right now, they just really became big enough to breed this year. They got them last year, about 18 months ago, as babies.
Oh.
So,
Yeah.
but now they're like 7 feet. Psycho monsters.
Wow.
What temperature do you keep the? Do you keep them? What temperature is the cool side? I guess.
Most of the time, it's probably in the low to mid 80s.
Okay.
I mean, at night it's obvious. See, my stuff's outside, so the variation is going to be pretty wild. But at night, they're considerably cool. And right now, it's been raining a lot, so their enclosure stays. It's probably in the 70s at night, all night, and then. But I'm figuring maybe in the hottest part of the day, the cool end's probably somewhere in the low to mid 80s, maybe even the upper 80s. But they're in this. Like, it's too hot for me to be out there, and they're out there, basking. I mean, like legit basking.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that cool spot being that hot is still, much hotter than I think what people would think the cool should be. Like it's still hotter all around. So that's interesting that they choose to even be in the hotter spot.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about where they come from, I've looked up. One of the first things I do when I get something is I tend to switch my phone to show me the weather for that area, in the little weather app thing. So I can keep track of it throughout the year, and I'll check, and look and see what it is. And where they come from is pretty damn similar to Florida as far as temperatures. So I figured they'd be a good candidate for being outdoors. They took the winter really well, which it was a relatively warm winter this year, but it's still, they got down in the 40s a few times, and it had no ill effect on them at all. So, I don't know. They're cool. I dig them. I'm hoping to produce those this year. That's one of the other things that
You're working with black-tailed Cribos, right?
I was, but when this collection of monitors came up, I had to cancel a whole. I basically wanted to really focus on these things, and I had at the time I was buying up projects. I mean, I had back-tailed geckos and all the morphs and all this stuff I had, because I had a few investors that wanted me to buy stuff, and at the time I was out buying stuff, and I was like, okay, well, we can make some money on this, and I kind of like these, and we can do a little bit on that. So I bought all these different projects, and then this monitor group came up, and I was like, well, shit, this is what I really want to do. And so I want to make sure that this happens. And I'm kind of, I have a hard time multitasking. I'm very, I can prosecute like one thing really fully, maybe up to 10 projects, and that's it. After that, I start getting too spread out. So I collapsed down. I got rid of the Cribos. I sold the whole fat tail colony. I was producing these giant Iranian leopard geckos. I sold all those. Basically everything that I had that wasn't, that that you didn't go out. Like every morning, the first thing I do when I get up is I go and I look at those lace monitors.
I bet.
I would.
Yeah, they're right outside my my back door, and we built this huge enclosure that goes along the entire house, and it's all divided. There's lace in there. There's giant black throats. There's the Cape monitors that we produce. There's Mertens. So when I look out the whole back of our house is all glass. So when we look out, we have all the monitors. And man, first thing I do when I get up in the morning is go walk that way and just walk through the house, down the glass doors, and look at them all, sunning themselves. And they're incredible. I've got Croc monitors again too. I'm one of the few people that's ever bred those. So I'll do that again, or try to.
Croc monitors are amazing.
Yeah, they're definitely one of my favorites.
Are you talking with Tom Crutchfield about that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, he and I we're friends, and I've gone down there a few times, and he picks my brain when he has a question about it. I think he's going to get it. I think his problem up until this point has been just nesting, because they're one of those things that if they're all varanids are this way. If they don't have a proper nest and it's not available to them year round, it seems like they won't produce. They'll either, and I'm not sure exactly what. I'm not a biologist, so I don't know exactly what the mechanism is that causes that, but pretty much we found that with varanids, and in particular croc monitors, they're more than likely a termite mound nester like plates and the other ones. So if you provide them with what is essentially a homemade termite mound, that's the magic bullet. And that thing has to be in there 24/7, never removed. And when the female, they'll check it out. When they see, it seems like when they know that they have the ability to lay their eggs, then they will go through the process along with, food cycling and a few other things, temperature cycling, and then they will do the job. And it seems to be that way across the board with varanids in general. And his nesting thing that he had was something that, because I really wasn't sure with Salvador, exactly what I did right. But basically, I worked on them for years, and then I talked to somebody who had this hypothesis that they laid their eggs in these giant arboreal plants. I forget the name of staghorns. It's a massive plant that apparently occurs in the same area that the crocs are found. And his hypothesis was, well, they probably lay their eggs up in the trees in those. I actually no longer believe that anymore. I think they probably come down to the ground, they find a termite mound, they rip it open, deposit their eggs, and go on. But at the time, I thought it was possible. So I took a giant trash can and I filled it with leaf litter and mulch to try to simulate one of these plants, and I cut a hole in the top, and then I hung this 150 pounds of garbage can up in the highest corner of the cage, and I started getting eggs from my croc monitors within 6 months of doing that. Wow. But what I really think is that I had made a sort of a homemade termite mound, because it's a hard shelled thing with organic material inside. And nowadays we just use these yellow lid Home Depot boxes, the tough totes, that come in all the sizes you could ever want. They're like perfect for varanid boxes. And just pack them with cocoa fiber and cut a hole in the top, and that's the magic nest thing. They all do it. I mean, I even use it for ackies, and 100% of the time they lay their eggs in the little fake termite mound. So, so I think that's really what the croc wants too. And so I told him about that when I kind of realized, well, this is probably what's going on here. So that final thing, sure he'll produce them. I mean, they're not super hard to breed. I used to get lots of infertile eggs, and actually, let me rephrase that. I didn't get infertile eggs. What I would get is female would grab it and then just scatter the eggs all over, and that's because she didn't have a proper nesting site that she wanted to deposit her eggs in. So she held them too long, dumped them all over, and by that time they're bad. But when I finally got it right with the nesting, then I started actually hatching them. That was probably the one thing I'm most proud of, and the biggest accomplishment I think I've ever had. The morph stuff is cool, but it's not the same as getting one of these rare species that are problematic in general, and a croc monitor baby is just something that, I mean, it's unbelievable when you see this little velociraptor that hatched out. And I mean, the first one that ever hatched, I was so excited I ripped the box off and I yelled to my ex-wife. I'm like, we did it! And I grabbed it without even thinking. It was slippery, and it turned around and it bit my index finger and just pulled back. It didn't put any pressure. It felt like a very light touch along my finger, and I was squirting blood out of it. It was like somebody took razor blades on two or three sides and just ripped it from one end to the other. It was one of the worst bites I ever had.
Straight out of the egg. That's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then a big one almost bit me in the face, and I got rid of him for a while. But a giant 9.5 foot tame one. One day I was showing off. I had a bunch of people over, and he was eating out of my hand like Crutchfield does, and I guess he didn't recognize the people that were there, and it made him nervous. That animal had never done anything like that. And he tried to bite me in the face. He charged, mouth open, and I grabbed him right as he was about to bite me, and then he grabbed my arm with his front feet, and they have enormous talons,
Yeah, they do.
And I threw him back, and when I did, he ripped my arm up on his way out with his claws, and then he hit the chain link fence, and he fell on the ground, and he came right back after me. I had to chase me out. Never had that animal do that. I mean, literally, I could hand feed him, and he was totally fine. But it was a hot day in August. The people that were there were people that had come down for the Daytona show and wanted to drive down to Miami to see what the collection, and I had set it up that day, and there was, I don't remember how many people were there, but there was, half dozen to a dozen. And I think it was just a combination of super hot, is at operating temperature, and then a lot of strangers. Monitors are really smart, and they definitely recognize you. And so I think it was just kind of a combination. And he was just like, man, I want you out, and he wasn't having it that day. So, and my ex-wife witnessed it and wouldn't let it go. She was like, one of these days, one of those is going to kill you, and we don't have health insurance, and how are we going to, that bite from those things is catastrophic, and they do have an unbelievable bite. But so I sold them sold the collection, and now recently I'm going to try again on just a pair, though, mostly because I went down to Crutchfield's a couple times to help him with that, and I just kept looking out. I was like, man, I miss these things. And so yeah, I don't know. It's one of those future things. Hopefully, in a year or two, I'll have them dialed in over here.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk a little more about the Cubans. Like you said, it is a potentially an up-and-coming thing in the industry. It does have the potential of becoming a little more mainstream now. Can you talk a little more about the ins and outs on them, everything from your dieting? I know you keep everything outside, so temperatures aren't really anything you can cover, but kind of give everyone listening a better understanding in case they might want to think about getting into this project.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually kept those indoors and outdoors. I've tried multiple systems. They all work to some degree. They just didn't work to the, I don't know. I'm psychotic about having things work exactly the way I want it. And so there was always little things that bugged me. So, but anyway, I was able to get them to produce them in pretty reliably, actually, in those Exoterra 3-foot enclosures. Zoom Ed makes them too, the front glass vivarium. And temperature-wise, they like basic room temperatures, 78 degrees, hot spot of maybe 85. Super easy. I keep them in pairs year-round. They will lay one egg every week, and I've had them lay up to 27 eggs a year from a single female, which was surprising. They're all over the map in how many you get. Some females will lay 6 or 8, which seems to be more closer to the average, but we have quite a few that have laid between 12 and 15, and then a couple of like superstars that lay like 20, 25 and stuff like that. So pretty much every week they'll deposit a single egg at the base of the plant. So we provide them with a potted plant, and then they go down to the base, they lay their egg in the dirt, and then you just got to dig the egg out. We incubate them at 78 degrees room temperature, just like the crested geckos, on vermiculite, like you would any gecko. I tried incubating them in incubators at warmer temperatures. It failed miserably. I tried using water suspension method that we use for monitor lizards. Failed miserably. They definitely do best when they're on simple, old school vermiculite, 1-to-1 kind of deal. So we feed them. I use a wide variety of stuff because we have all these different lizard species here, so we have so many different food items available, and they will eat everything from soft fruit to rapashi diets, particularly crested gecko diets. They destroy that, and I use that pretty heavily for those. We also get a hornworm shipment in every week once a week, everybody gets hornworms, and we use super worms and crickets and a lot of fruit. We eat bananas and raspberries, and so super easy to take care of. I mean, I have actually raised them exclusively on Repashy diets to test that out, and I had no negative effects at all. So they're probably, they're very similar to the crested geckos, other than the fact that they need, UV and a little more heat. And you might actually be able to get away with them at straight room temperatures at just 78 degrees without the heat. I just never tested it, but it's possible, because outdoors I keep them in the shade, and they do bask, but they only bask in the morning for a short time, and then they'll bask in the evening again. But when I had them initially, that's an animal that I have a long history with, because I've been collecting them since I was a little kid. So I knew that they, either on the hottest parts of the day, you would always find them in the shade. So I kind of, set them like that. But I did a test for a while, having them in full sun at all times. They still had shaded areas, but they had the ability at all times to get to a sunny spot within the enclosure, and that didn't work well. So getting them so now I have them under these huge trees that shade, the hottest part of the day, and they get early morning sun and evening sun. So they definitely like that upper 70s, mid 80s kind of temp. Pretty much everything about them is very well suited for captivity, with all the available tools that we have, because ever since the crested gecko revolution, we have a lot of technology now for that, and they work really well with that. So I've actually even bred those anoles in large Rubbermaid boxes that I jury rigged up to be able to run, UV on them and stuff like that, and they did well on that too. So it's just a matter of them doing as well as I liked. I would get a lot of eggs deposited in places that clearly the nesting wasn't proper, so that was an issue. And then once I finally found a potted plant that I forget what they call it. I think they call it a corn plant. It's basically a decorative plant they sell at most Home Depots, and it's got a nice thick stalk and big leaves on the top. And that plant seems to be perfect. They absolutely, it has everything they need, because they like to grip onto large branches, and they also like the large leaves that catch the water for them to lift the water off of and stuff like that. They do need a lot of hydration, and typically night hydration is better. So when we go, most of the time I don't have to worry about it here, because I'm in Central Florida and I get pretty much daily rains. But when we go through dry periods, I go out there at night after the sun goes down, and I spray everything down to simulate dew. I also have them in places where they can get natural dew on top of that. So they're very most arboreal species and desert species, for that fact, are very dependent on dew cycles. And I think in captivity we do a lot of things ass backwards, because we try to give them water mostly during daytime when we're up and around. And I found over the years that you're basically my feeling is you're trying to fill a cup with a hole in it like that, because if you're giving them the water during the day when they're burning it right off, they don't really get a chance to utilize, and you're like always fighting dehydration in some. It's a particular problem with lizards. Anything that'll drink from a water bowl obviously doesn't have this problem, but things that tend not to, hydration is a problem. And so I found that by soaking them at night, they spend the entire night sitting in on these wet leaves and soaking in the dew and the high humidity, and the difference is night and day. I've even experimented heavily on baby bearded dragons, which because that is, again, a bearded dragon in the desert. Every night in the desert, for the most part, they get a dew spike because of the temperature drop, and that's where those animals get their water from. So I started simulating that. Because like with bearded dragons, everybody just kind of throws them in a bowl during they soak them, and soaking is like the most unnatural thing for an animal that would really never experience that unless maybe, a couple times a year through a monsoon rain where it might leave some small puddles in the ground. But how are they, it's just like unnatural. You take a bearded dragon out of its hot enclosure and you throw it in the daytime into a cool water, and then it gets its hydration, you throw it back in, but you're sucking it right back out because they're in these high intense lights and everything. So I started doing it at night. I would just go in there and spray everything down and leave them in in a dew, basically simulate dew. And it really has changed a lot of, it's made a lot of lizard species for me personally that were once, I always felt like I was always behind. Like I wasn't getting the production out of them I expected. They never looked as good as I thought they should look. And it now, by using that method, it's been a game changer as far as that. I think.
And do you let the water catch on plants, or do you have like a glass or something for the water and the moisture to kind of beat up on? Or
I mean, if it's for like baby bearded dragons, we generally tend to keep them in these like big Rubbermaid boxes that have no lids. They have screen. They're in like a shelf with a screen top where the lights are. So in those, I just spray the whole sides down, and
okay,
it stays, basically like dew on the sides, and then they go to the sides and they drink. I got this idea because I was out in a field with some friends 2 years ago hunting veil chameleons down in Fort Myers, Florida, and it was a dry night. We had been out there all night. And we didn't see anything, and about 2:30, 3 a.m. in the morning, all of a sudden I noticed that the dew was, we were getting covered in dew. It was settling. And as we did, all of a sudden brown anoles started coming out of hiding and started drinking water off the leaves. And within, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes of that dew settling, we started finding veil chameleons after spending hours scouring these fields looking for them. Then they just started to appear. And they were awake and they were drinking water. And a light bulb went off in my head. I was like, son of a bitch. This is how these things get their water all the time. This is what we're doing wrong. Water them during the day, and we take it immediately right back out. Especially in an indoor system, when you're generally it's an air conditioned room, which sucks the humidity out, and then you've got lights on top of that, so you're just filling a glass with a hole in it, and it's a futile effort. So, but if they get it at night, they get to spend 6-7 hours marinating in that, fully absorbing everything that they need. And so I started utilizing that on everything that I do, as far as things like tegus and monitors are super easy. You throw a bowl in there and you're done. They take care of it themselves. But little things like anoles, I would imagine that geckos would probably benefit greatly from that method.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the most part, a lot of the species that we have the things that thrive in spite of the mistakes that we make. And so, but I think if you improve the methods for them, I think you'll also open up maybe other things that were previously considered difficult. Might not be if you adopted those sorts of tactics. I mean, a leopard gecko will clearly drink from a water bowl, but it would never find a water bowl where it comes from. It would be drinking dew off of rock crevices, and so maybe some of the harder to breed geckos. I just over the years I found that a lot of problems with breeding stuff in general is a hydration problem. People generally look at food first, but that's not been my experience. I think they can pretty much most things, as long as the food is. I mean, look, we live off of all kinds of shit that we eat. I mean, and so I mean, you can live off some pretty crappy stuff, and I don't think food really is the be all end all. I think more than a lot of things, I think hydration is a bigger captive problem.
Do you think blue tongue skinks would benefit in that? Because I see them drinking out of water bowls and stuff, but to your point, northerns especially, like northern Australian species, I would imagine that they wouldn't be drinking during the day a lot of times.
Well, that's funny you say that, because I actually have quite a few northerns outside. We keep them in pairs year round in these basically 4 by 4 foot cubes that are 3 feet tall, and it's multi-tiered, so they have a shelving system and ramps that go up to it that simulate like rock crevices. And every morning, so they also have a wooden subfloor. So I give the monitors and everything that will use it. I give them all subfloors, even the bearded dragon. So when we do all our bearded dragons outdoors, so they can go completely underneath the floor. It's all screwed. It's thick wood, but that subfloor collects the dew at night on the top. And I have seen the blue tongues every morning, 5-6 a.m. right as the sun starts to come up, out there lapping water off the dew. Now they all have water bowls and they do use them, but they absolutely do drink dew water. I've seen it multiple times. And it's funny that you brought that up because I just really noticed that a couple days ago. I was out there, I saw them all, and I noticed they were all out drinking the dew, but I had pulled the water bowls the day before.
Yeah.
Bleach them, so they were making up for it, I guess, by doing that. But yeah.
I was just, as you're talking, I'm just thinking about like sometimes, and people, they say, oh, you can keep them too humid and blah, blah, blah. But, Northerns, I think, are in a pretty humid area. And the Indonesians are in pretty humid area. But if we're doing it during the day, and especially if we're using UVB, how much humidity are they really taking in? Now that you're saying that, like it's like light bulb in my head thinking, I bet if we misted them at night to simulate dew, they probably would do better.
Yep.
Maybe hydration-wise a bit, they have water to drink, but skin-wise, like what they're taking in and what they can sit in.
Yep.
I mean,
the indoor problem is tricky because you got to fight with this cleanliness and there's all these other things that you got to deal with. So I'm really not qualified to speak on that part, but I don't really have much experience doing stuff indoors at this point. But I mean, it definitely, I do think that, and to your point about like people say about the dry thing, like I've heard that my entire life about bearded dragons, and I've been breeding bearded dragons outdoors in Florida, and for some of those years for me anyway, a considerably large scale. I mean, I used to produce 10,000 baby dragons a year.
Crap.
And it's all been done outside. And the first thing that a lot of people will say when they hear that I do them in Florida is like, well, what about yellow fungus? And I have never had a single instance of yellow fungus. Yellow fungus does not come from humidity. Dragons get yellow fungus because people keep them in terrible, shitty conditions. Very dirty, all the places that have, and I know these places personally. So when I see these outbreaks come out, I know exactly the kind of husbandry that these places have, and I know exactly what goes on. And in every case, it's overcrowded conditions, and filthy environment. I keep our bearded dragons are set up in one male and two females, in the same cubes that I was describing for the blue tongues. It's 4 foot by 4 foot with a subfloor, and then they have big branches and multiple shelving, and so inside of this cage there's a lot of landscape that they can utilize. I just don't build a box. I view the box as you have to furnish it after you do it. So I spend actually more time doing the furnishing inside the cages than I do actually building the cages. The cages are, so. But all that is to add usable real estate, and that makes a big difference. It lets them get away from each other, and so, and in the desert, and I've only had 1 or 2 experiences with desert herping, but I noticed that when I was out in Anza Borrego, and the reptiles that we found, they were all found in canyons full of large rocks where the humidity was higher. They're not out in a dry sand. They actually inhabit humid areas in the desert. Sure. They dig holes under rocks that hold the humidity from the dew the night before.
Mm-hmm.
So bearded dragons do that. Uromastics do that. That's why they dehydrate in captivity. They're just not getting enough. So humidity is not. It's kind of a. It's a red herring with this industry. I hear it all the time, and I've bred all sorts of species outside in Florida. And where we currently live, we're sandwiched between two lakes, and it rains every day. So the humidity outside where we're at now is ungodly. You walk outside right now and you literally burst into a water vapor. It's horrible and super, super humid, but everything does great in that. Even a relatively dry species like bearded dragons, of which we have somewhere around 100 adults outside under those conditions. And it's really more about overcrowding, keeping things clean, not being dumb, pretty much. So
we should make that a shirt.
Yeah, right. Our relationship, me, Ben, and Ryan actually started because of blue tongues. So whenever blue tongues come up in conversations in these podcasts, we tend to, dig a little bit into how people are doing it, just out of curiosity. And, like you said, everybody has their own way that works for them, and you shouldn't necessarily try to replicate it. But, you're doing stuff a little differently. I know of some breeders in Europe that are keeping them together in colonies and have been very successful doing it. I'm going to ask you like a 5-part question here, and whatever you remember, you just answer.
Yeah.
First curiosity would be, how many pairs do you have? Followed by, do you introduce them as babies and raise them up until you can determine sex and then group them that way? Or are you introducing adults together? I'm not going to do all 5 questions. We're going to do those 2, and we're going to get to the next ones after.
Okay. On the third one, both. I try to raise them up. I actually raise them in groups, and then once they get a little bit bigger and I can kind of make a guess at what their sex is, then I try to split them off then. But I also have instances where I was wrong, and then I would just take one female that I knew was a female, put it with a male as an adult, and I've not had problems. They can be aggressive, but I mean, I have 10 pairs currently, all set up outside year round, and I've actually bred blue tongues, multiple species, off and on for the last 30 years, just depending. Like I had multifasciata. I never actually bred those, but I had a group of those years ago in the 90s. And I've had and bred, like when the first Iriangias came in, I was like amazed. I bought tons of those, and I bred them for years. And I bred Gigas and lots of Northerns and some skink corgis. But I always kept, like, in the 90s, I used to keep them, like you said, in big groups. I basically would keep them in these 8-foot by 8-foot outdoor enclosures, and I put up to 6 or 8 animals in there. Now, the one thing I did is a friend of mine, the guy actually that lived next door to me, owned a roofing company he specialized in those terracotta barrel tile roofs. So he always had shit tons of them left over of all different kinds. So he would give me these pallets of them. And so when I built the cage for the blue tongues, I would cover the bottom in those terracotta tiles. So they literally they could totally get away from each other. They would never see each other if they needed to. And if any kind of aggression broke out, they had plenty of places to go. So the entire 8x8 area probably had, 20 or 30 of these 2-foot terracotta barrel tiles in them. And that let me do pretty well with them. I mean, I produced a lot of blue tongues that way, and they were totally fire and forget. I mean, I threw food in there, and then, oh, look, there's babies. So, and that's kind of how we do them now. We just set them up, but now we do them smaller, more controlled things. She wants to eventually do the albinos and the black ones and stuff like that. So when I went back to doing blue tongues, I was like, okay, we'll set this up so we have more specific control over who breeds who, but it's still going to be set them up in a pair and then leave them alone. And then I never separate them ever. And we've been pulling babies for the last week or two. So it's kind of cool. I mean, having the subfloor is a little bit of an issue with the babies because when they're born, sometimes they don't want to come out of the subfloor and I have to get out there and unscrew the whole thing and go looking for them. But actually, most of the time now, though, I just kind of wait. I know that at 9 a.m. in the morning when the sun hits the top of that board, they'll all be out there piled up, and I just go pick them up. So that's what I'm more or less doing. But
That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, a blue tongue is another one. I mean, there's tons of ways you can do it. Ray Gerge does them all singly and introduces them, and obviously he's doing well, and lots of other people do it that way. I just don't want to clean boxes. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to have to think about it, to be perfectly honest. I've got a lot of stuff and I don't want to go, oh man, did I miss that? You know, should I put them together? What if I put them together? What if we breed them? What if it doesn't take? And, you know, and then I don't get them back in time. So I like to hedge my bets by making sure that when they're ready, they have what they need to do the job. And that's what I do for all this stuff. So I kind of just build their thing the way I think it should be, and then I step back and just, you know, add food, water, and then minor tweaks depending on their behavior. And I do that with everything universally. Did I forget anything on the blue tongues?
Oh, well, you covered my first two questions, but I still have some more for you. So,
Have at it.
So following up with what you just said, okay, so, you know, Florida, like you said, you really don't have the cool down opportunity. You know, you created with colubrids early on. You know, you just kind of did them at warmer temperatures, and it worked out for you. So you have 10 pairs of blue tongues. You have them living together year round. They don't necessarily brumate, or do they have about a month they completely shut down where you don't see them, or are they pretty much out and about year round?
Well, I mean, it gets cold. I mean, I'm in Orlando, so it gets pretty cold up here as far as Florida goes, anyway. You know,
Cold,
I mean,
yeah,
cold. But in the wintertime, you know, it'll get in the upper 30s, 40s a lot of nights, and in the daytime, the highs maybe 70. So what I basically do is I just leave them out there. I cover the cages on super cold nights with 6 mil plastic to keep the frost off. That's it. I don't add any supplemental heating at all. You know, so they get a cool period, and it's probably pretty close to what they would experience in the wild. If you look at the data, especially out of Australia, I mean, they get cold pretty much in most of Australia at night. Like the lace monitors we have, they come from a place that gets, you know, cold, like Georgia cold. And those things, okay, Georgia cold for a Floridian, Georgia's cold compared to, I get it, you guys all live up there in the frozen.
Yeah, we're in the tundra.
Yeah, but you know, but that's, I mean, for a reptile anyway, that's relatively cold. So
Yeah.
On days that we did get down to 39 one night, and I actually was a little worried about it. I was like, man, you know, this lace, I know they're under the subfloor, but are they going to be warm enough? You know, is there any risk to them? And man, it was so cold to me, you know, I was freezing my ass off, and they were out walking around in it. And none of the other reptiles were doing that. I mean, everything else was out. The lace were fully active. So they can really take some cold. And then I started looking into where they come from, and then I realized, oh yeah, well, where they come from, freezing is not that uncommon. So, and considerably, you know, like in the 20s freezing for them. So they're adapted to that. But even northerns, I think they can in the wintertime. You know, their daytime highs still are, you know, 80 something, I guess, from what the last time I checked. So it's very similar to Florida. I think it's just cold enough just to do the job.
Do you food cycle with that?
Yeah, I use food cycling for everything. I pretty much don't feed anything here from sometime between September and October. I take everything off food, and then I don't usually start feeding again until the various species basically give me cues that they're ready to start feeding again. So, like the blue tongues, I don't think I fed them from. I think the blue tongues I take off generally, they're a little later, maybe late November, and then I don't feed them again until early March, late February. So they go off for a few months.
So that's a pretty similar timeline for where I'm at over here personally. Yeah. Usually I try to get them off food around Thanksgiving, and I try to have them back on food and breeding by Valentine's Day.
Yeah. And most stuff that I work with, that's the schedule. That's the sweet spot, especially for Australian species. It seems like in this hemisphere, that's the timeline when they tend to go off feed on their own. You don't really have to do anything, and then they generally start wanting to eat again right around mid-February. Then February 15th is actually what I consider the date, because that's when I see the bearded dragons start getting ready to lay eggs, and the blue tongues are doing their thing, and the ackies and the other stuff. So that is about the right time. I think it's probably almost universal for that. But yeah, I don't feed. I am one of these people that feed a little bit less than a lot of people do, only because over the years I have also discovered that, like we talk about this now in the industry a lot, but prior to the last few years, you didn't really hear about it. But a lot of our stuff, we just feed it too much. It's kind of it's a curse of riches. We overdo it. So then, especially with males, if you let males get fat, they don't want to do anything. They just want to lay around and wait for the next meal. I can relate to that. So
we were
right
talking
there
about
with you.
yeah. What's going on?
So particularly, I try to keep the males leaner. I don't really feed that much anymore. Most of those things I only feed once or twice a week. The blue tongues I feed mostly about once a week.
Mhm.
They get a wide range. I mean, I do everything from, I use a lot of Missouri crocodile diet for them because it's super easy. They'll eat it dry, and it's probably one of my favorite diets that I use for a lot of stuff. It's just well formulated. You get a lot of bang for your buck out of that, and anything they'll eat it. It's especially blue. I mean, I've raised blue tongues entirely on it, and they were the best looking blue tongues I've done. They had no issues at all. So I use a lot of that, and then the blue tongues. Since I have tegus that I still do up until the ban recently, but I'm working on that. I also have a lot of fruit because we feed them a lot of fruit. So I give all the leftovers to the blue tongues, and they also get a hornworm thing. Like every 2 weeks or so, I'll go through and give them all the hornworms and stuff like that. So I just try to mix it up, but I don't know. It's
Okay. So no, you're good. This is great. Honestly, I love hearing about how different people do it. We've been fortunate enough that we've actually had quite a few different skink breeders on here so far, and I don't think any two people have done it the same yet, especially when it comes to diet. Everyone does it differently, and again, what works for you works for you.
Yep.
Okay, my last question, because one thing that we've experienced in blue tongue skinks, which I've noticed over the last 5 years, is we have a lot of newer people getting into it, and we have a lot of people that have been doing it for a while that are growing their collections even bigger now. And it seems like the trend is the bigger you get isn't necessarily better with this species. People are getting a lower percentage of their animals going the bigger they get. My question for you is, so you have 10 pairs outside year round. Out of those 10 pairs on average, how many of those would you say cycle for you every year?
Well, so far this year we've had 3 litters born. I think there's 5 or 6 more, maybe, that will go, but I'm not sure. So it's kind of hard to tell with them when they're gravid, especially when they're outdoors. They don't. The only way I really know to really start is when I see the females basking more than usual. They tend to spend a lot more time basking. Right now I've got 5 or 6 females, so I might end up with 90% this year, but it's kind of all over the board. It just depends. It's for me, the blue tongues are, like I said, they're more of a fire and forget thing. I set them up and then I just kind of don't really pay too much attention to them, and then I find babies and pull them. But I think I probably get around. I usually get probably 70% of the females available as a safe bet every year.
That's good.
So, yeah, but that bigger thing is pretty. I mean, I find that across the board. Even with my own, I will. In the past, I built colonies up to a certain point where I made them too big, and then everything goes to shit once you get to a certain size, a certain level. So these days we keep pretty much everything under 10 pairs is what the number that we shoot for. We just try to do different projects, So 10 pairs now is our magic number. Whereas in the past, depending on what I was working on, I would set up 100 of something or 150. Like there was a time where I was absolutely off my mind and I had 250 tegus. That would never happen again. And that was the case. I had 10 pairs of tegus for years, and I produced the first blue tegus, and then I produced the first albino blue tegus, and I was doing really well. And the day those freaking albino blue tegus were born, I lost my fucking mind. Because I thought, okay, now I'm going to finally, so I grew up I'm from a working class family in Miami. We grew up relatively poor. So for me, that tegu thing was winning the lottery. And I thought, well, shit, now I can, this is like, albino boa level, stuff. I'll be able to actually make money and get out of the hole. So lost my mind. Went from 10 pairs to 250 in less than a year. I kept everything back. And within 4 years of that, I almost lost everything, house, everything. I just refused to admit that I couldn't do it, and I just kept trying to force a round peg through a square hole. That thing almost took me out. And after that, I took 2 years off from the industry and spent some time thinking about things. And when I went back, I'm like, you know what? I always had a rule, a few things. One is that I wouldn't keep more than 10 pairs of anything. 10 pairs was always like, for me, the magic number. So I went back to that model and I kind of stuck with that. And, I don't know. I know a lot of these big breeders that have, and some people can make it work. But I mean, I've noticed a definite trend that once you get to a certain size, your quality goes down. And I mean, it's kind of natural. It's just like, it's the Walmart effect, once it gets to a certain, you have to start making more sacrifices. You can't throw as much of yourself into it. So you start to get a negative impact that way. You make more money, but it does start to affect the quality of the product. So it's kind of a quantity quality thing, and you just got to decide what is more important to you. For me, it's just always been, I need to feel good about what I'm selling, and that's how I've kept my reputation fairly intact for as long as I've been in there. But I try, and if I do fuck up, I try to overcompensate for that mistake. So I just keep things small. If I don't have I don't have any, external pressures from, oh, I have to make this amount to pay for this bill. I keep my bills basically are almost non-existent. I keep everything down. We do almost entirely DIY. We do almost everything ourselves except for things that we can't, build. We'll buy caging and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're 100% DIY, and all that stuff is done so that we're not beholden to anybody or anything, and we can do what we need, what we feel is best for the various projects. So that doesn't really result well in your pocketbook, but it's more fun anyway. I think anyway. I did the commercial thing for a while. Like I said, I was producing 10,000 bearded dragons a year. I was doing that for basically an account that sold to Petco and PetSmart. That was pretty miserable. I spent 6 years doing it. I made more money than I ever made in this business in my life, but I hated every minute of it. And when actually on the day that they pulled the plug on it, I should have been really bummed about it, but I was actually kind of relieved. I was like, oh shit, it's over, because I couldn't give it up because I was getting good paychecks, and the gig that I had with them is that I would hatch them and then take them to the facility where they would then do the rest of the raising. So I didn't even have to do it. I just had to hatch them. So it was pretty good. I didn't have all this extra labor, and they took them from hatchling and then did all the work to get them to 5 inches. And so for me, it was a good gig, but it was pretty hollow and wasn't fun. And it didn't leave me any time to do anything but bearded dragons for that period. That's all I did. And I mean, I've bred those since 1988. They're the thing that has kept me, floating and allowed me to work on the blood boas and work on the motley boa and the tegus and stuff like that. So it sucked. And my quality definitely did go down as far as, when I was producing 10,000, they weren't nearly as good as when I was producing 1,000. which 1,000 bearded dragons sounds like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, that's 10 females producing, and it's spread over 6 months. It's really not that many. Nowadays, we produce around 3,000, but there's 2 of us, and she does actually the bearded dragon thing. She pretty much does all of it. Having her now allowed me to totally step back, because she's like all into this. She loves those bearded dragons. That's her big thing. She's really into the monitors and everything else too, but she's really at heart. The dragon is her, her thing, and she does them way better than I ever did. So
it's like a happy balance.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay, now this is, I remember years ago when I got in the hobby, a lady who had been in the hobby for years before me would tell me that the early bearded dragons that came in the country were giant compared to what we're working with now. And I did hear, there was the German giant line stuff for a while that was really popular, but is that true back in like the late 80s, early 90s? What was coming in? Was it giant compared to what we're working with now?
Like a baby's arm, or
Yeah,
baby's forearm, buddy.
I think most of that is the Heather's actually working on doing that. She has bearded dragons now. We have dragons here that are as big as anything we had back then. But it is true that overall the trend has been downward in size. That seems to have been accelerated once the mutations started to arise. So obviously we're doing they were already heavily inbred, because there never was really a lot of initial bearded dragons that were brought in. So they're all come from a relatively small gene pool. But when you exacerbate that with, chasing different morphs and doing a lot of them are recessive, and then doing a lot of, sibling breedings and mom to son and stuff like that, you're amplifying other traits along with it. And one of those has been, a decrease in size. Now, Heather cares a lot about the size. So she basically looks and holds back big ones. And I mean, she has dragons here. Trying to think, she's got several of them here that are bigger than anything I ever had. The German giant thing, so that's been around a long time, and people still throw it around, but like it's kind of become this myth in the trade. That was a group of animals that was produced by Pete Weiss back in the 90s, I guess it was now. And he basically had, his bearded dragons were bigger than normal. I mean, he had like 28-inch dragons. He didn't really understand how he even got those. And so his thinking was, well, the founding ones I got, they were a hybrid of Barbata and Viticeps. Well, since that time, I've actually made that cross, and it doesn't result in giant dragons. It actually kind of has the opposite effect. They generally tend to be smaller. So I think personally he just had like a good line of really big dragons. And after seeing the ones that Heather has, but I think he imported them from Germany. And so that's where the whole German giant thing came from. But really what it was is it was just a line of very large dragons. And Pete, it's definitely, one of those traits that you can amplify, which is what Heather's been doing. But yeah, in general, the trend has been downward. And I see that with actually Northerns these days. It seems to me like Northerns have gotten a lot smaller than the monsters that I had in the 90s and remember from back then too. Like it just seems to generally have gotten a little bit smaller. So that might be a natural, trend in captivity in general, where everything gets, they're evolving to fit the circumstances. They're in smaller enclosures, they're, all that. So we hyper accelerate that by, we grow everything up fast, we breed it really fast, multiple generations accumulate much more quickly than they would in the wild. So, could be, there's all kind of things that probably are at play there in multiple areas. But yeah, I definitely see a downward trend, and how much of that is actually, genetic bottlenecks from, excessive inbreeding showing up, or there could be a myriad of reasons. I mean, I don't know. Over the years, I used to believe that inbreeding was like a super problem, but I think actually it's less of a problem than make it out to be with reptiles. Because if you think about it, reptiles are not like mammals. They're not traveling long distances to find unrelated partners. They're the pair of animals that mates in a specific area, for the most part, are going to lay eggs right there where they did the job, and then those babies are going to hatch and become bred by their siblings, the parents, the whatever is in the area. So reptiles naturally, they naturally inbreed in the wild. They have to. I don't see any other way that they don't. Now, new genetic material obviously does get introduced there once in a while, but I gotta believe that, especially a lot of these more isolated populations, where those are heavily inbred. I mean, they've probably been doing that for hundreds of thousands of years in some cases, like some of those island populations. That's how we have all that stuff, like the Nosy Bay blue panther chameleons. They're blue there because they wound up in that spot and they got isolated from the other ones, and they evolved. Blue obviously was the magic color for that area, so I think in some cases, I think most of the problems I think we see though with other stuff is that we don't really be thoughtful in breeding. A lot of us, and I mean I'm guilty of this to some degree too over the past. If I've got something that's really freaking shit hot amazing, but it's small, or it's a little weaker, but it's really amazing, I'll still try to breed that out because that thing's really amazing. And, and everybody does that to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're all doing it and we're all contributing to it, I think that's more of a problem than anything else. And that's one of the reasons why, for me personally, I'm avoiding morphs. I mean, we do a lot of morphs and we're doing that. But I mean, just for me personally, the stuff that I'm interested in now has no morphs at all. I just don't even want to. That's the stuff I just don't want to even think about it. I mean, like I said, we will eventually do the morph, the blue tongues, because that's how you pay the bills, and we do the morph crested geckos because that's how you pay the bill. But my stuff personally is those lace monitors. I'm going to make sure that as I'm producing stuff, we only keep stuff back for ourselves that are the absolute vigorous, most has the most vigor, a whole list of criteria that we'll go through, and anything that's not up to that standard is not something that I'm doing. But when you have to worry about morphs and you have to worry about making something that the public will really like, and you're trying to set yourself apart from all the other guys that are out there making more stuff, you've got to sometimes make decisions that are probably somewhat detrimental maybe down the line. But I don't know, man. I'm not an expert. I could be totally wrong. That's just the way. I'm just throwing shit at the wall because that's stuff that I personally think that maybe that's more of a thing that we should pay attention to. And I'm going to try to do that with those morphanoles, because if I can at least keep the quality, the vigor up as long as I can. Once they get out of my hands, and that's nothing I can do about it. But so I don't know. That's just me rambling.
Yeah. Some people in the industry are morph driven. Some people are species driven. That's the best thing about this hobby. There's something for everybody.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, dude, I love the morphs just like everybody else, and I've definitely spent a lot of time with it. But I've gotten bored with that over the years. I don't know. And I really, honestly, I like selectively bred stuff. Like maybe taking a specific color or pattern and just working that out. I mean, I've seen like a good red bearded dragon, to me, blows away almost all the mutations, and that's just a natural color. Just people were thoughtful about how they paired them out and made them like super red. So, and that's what I'd like to do with the Bell's Phase lace monitor, which we have quite a few. Most of the lace monitors we have are Bells. So my goal with those eventually is, once I get them producing, to take the best looking bells, breed them back to the other best look, and try to take that outward and enhance that part of it. And that's a little bit easier to do than, especially when you can draw on. It's a limited gene pool too. It's all from a few legal animals that were brought in 2010, I think. So there's really not a lot of not a lot of genetic diversity with them, but it's enough that you can at least spend probably 30 years, 40 years before it'll be a real problem. So I don't know. That's where my head's at. But like I said, dude, we got a lot of morphs here. We got the crested geckos and all this other bearded dragons, and there's crap here that I can't even remember right now. So I'm not dissing morphs or anything like that. So if I came across that way, I didn't mean to, but
No, I wouldn't. I don't think anybody took it that way. You guys have anything? Oh, maybe Ben did, but Ben's pretty fucking.
I did have a quick question that would be an easy one before we get into some of the weird stuff that I like to get into. But did you ever breed or think about breeding feeder geckos?
Actually, I accidentally did once. So there were all these Pictus gecko morphs. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but it's little Madagascar ground geckos. But for a while there, a buddy of mine, I went to my buddy's house. He was always into guppies. And so he got into this, basically the gecko version of a guppy. It was just this little gecko, easy to produce. They literally start breeding at, I think, 45 days old is when they'll start laying eggs. And they will lay 2 eggs every 2 weeks. I mean, they'll kill themselves laying eggs if you don't force them to stop. And he was producing all these. So I went to his house one day, and I hadn't seen him in a couple of years. And he's like, "Oh yeah, you got to see the Pictus collection." And I walked into this little Ted shed that he had in his backyard. And he had 1,000 breeding Pictus in it, and I was like, "Holy shit, dude! I've never seen this." And he's like, "Yeah, I sell them to Petco now for $4.50 or $5. It was almost nothing." I was like, "Oh." I was like, "That's cool," but he's like, "But they crank out, and I'm doing all this stuff." And he's like, "And look what I've got." And he opened box after box after box, had all these mutations. He had gotten albinos, aneries, hypos, stripes, pieds. He had all of these, and I'm like, dude, what the hell? He had black-eyed ones and these other morphs that we didn't even have a name for them. So I was like, man, this is awesome. They're little. They're kind of like a small leopard gecko. So I bought 600 of them that day. Yeah. And I took them home. And I had bred Pictus before, but I really, for some reason, thought it took, 6 months at least to get them up to breeding size. So I brought all these fresh hatchlings. 45 days later, they started laying eggs. And I couldn't even keep up with it. I'd go in there and day sometimes. I was like, yeah, no, this isn't working. So, and I didn't have an outlet to sell them, so I started selling to people for feeders. And I was selling people albino Pictus, and hypo Pictus as a feeder gecko. Now, and oddly enough, those Pictus geckos. So I stopped doing them within a year. I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this. And then he eventually stopped doing it as well. And when he did, there was no more Pictus geckos on the market. And now those morphs sell for a couple $100. So it's kind of crazy.
It's the blood bow all over again.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is because we have some snakes that really could eat some feeder geckos.
What kind of you guys? Which ones?
I would say our pygmy pythons would be a perfect example of snake we would love to get. Ryan doesn't want us to do it because he doesn't want to have to fight to switch them over to rodents, but
I think antares are hard to get on rodents anyway, aren't they? They're more of a lizard feeder.
In the beginning, yeah. Once they switch over, though, they're like rock solid, hardy eaters, great, but
just get them to that size, If
I've had children's in the past and spotteds and stuff, but I never got them as babies, and when I did get them, they were already rodent eaters. But yeah, I really like all that stuff. I mean, like I said, my interest in this ranges from the entire thing. Everything from tortoises and I bred a lot of frogs, and it just depends. I get bored and then I go off on a side thing and see, maybe I can do this. But my real thing, if I was forced to choose something, it would probably be monitor lizards. Has really always been the tegu thing, I've done them for so long that I honestly, I mean, the ban is bullshit that they just did, and they did give us a grandfathering, so we could keep doing them. But honestly, for me personally, I was kind of relieved. I was like, I mean, it sucks for the industry, and we need to fight it. But just for my personal feeling, I was like, okay, well, this gives me an excuse to finally walk away from this because I've been these for a while. I just always felt like I couldn't. So, but I am grandfathered, and we do have some of the last year. I can't remember his name right now, but this guy in Miami produced the first albino red tegus, like legit, real, pure red tegus. And then we bought a pair of them.
You might be talking about Carlos.
No.
Not Carlos. Okay.
No, not Carlos. Carlos produces the hybrids, and he has stuff like that. This guy, God, it's killing me. I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, John Rosenstock brought these in like 10 years ago. They were born in a farm in Argentina. They're the only two albino red tegus ever known. And for 10 years, they tried to get them to breed, and they were unsuccessful. And then last year, he loaned them to this dude in Miami that produced them. So we bought a female, a buddy of mine bought another one, and so now I have a pair of them. And those I'm not going to get rid of. I'm going to go ahead and use my grandfather clause to keep those and to do that project, because those are absolutely amazing. I mean, you know, I did produce the first albino blue tegus, and I'm proud of those and everything, but these things blow those away. When I saw them, I was like, man, this is what I always wanted.
Wow.
So, I mean, we have a pair, and they're adults now, and should produce those this year. But yeah, the tegu thing is a real issue. I mean, it's one of those cases where we're our own worst enemy, and it wasn't. Although it is painted as like pet people doing this, it was all the result of one irresponsible importer, a guy down in Miami. I can't remember his name, but it's not one of the names that most people know. He was just a guy that was bringing in stuff out of Paraguay, and he was basically an asshole, and he couldn't sell them, and he turned them loose.
And
how
many?
I don't know the exact number, but it had to be a substantial amount, probably somewhere in 50 to 100 range, because these populations, they don't get started from people dumping a random pet in a field. They just don't. Most of those animals get eaten or something happens to them long before they find a suitable mate, breed, and then make babies. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
All these populations that got established are all from large scale, introductions where somebody took a large number and dumped them in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was relatively safe. And then they were able to quickly get a foothold, and then they radiate outwards. So the general media reporting on that is absolute nonsense. And I have a hard time believing that any biologist that doesn't have, that's not going to maybe benefit from this whole thing would even entertain that as a logical theory that it's from random dumpings of pets. I mean, think about it, man. People are going to dump shit. The chances that that two people within a relatively short amount of time are going to dump opposite-sexed animals in a place where they would be able to find each other instead of spread out, which literally could be anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Chances of that happening. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
And even if multiple people are using one particular spot, which everybody knows they're not, nobody's going to get in their car and drive, X amount of miles. If they're going to dump stuff, they're going to go to the field down the street from their house, and they're just going to dump it out. And then almost everything is going to either get run over by a car or killed by a dog or a cat, especially if they're pets, because pet reptiles don't really know how to survive in the wild either. It takes them a little while. And while they're trying to figure that out, where the safe spot is, where should I be, they're open to predation much more than it would be if they were born there and they grew up there. So, it's large scale introductions by mostly, I mean, it was a thing. I mean, I know personally where lots of things have been dumped. And I used to go around and catch stuff in those spots. You could pretty much, like I told you about the phone book thing before, you can pretty much take a phone book you can go back in history for the last 30 or 40 years and find where reptile import facilities are located and go to those locations. And I promise you, more often than not, you will find populations of species, and those were species that escaped over time. The good thing about that is most of them were inside warehouse districts, inside inner city, Miami. And so they never really got spread out because they had nowhere to go. Where are they going to go out of the concrete? So they're just isolated in these little pockets surrounded by, and they actually fill a niche in that area because the native wildlife was exterminated a long time ago. So these things fill these niches in there. So they're actually not, invasive species inside the city is not really a problem. Burmese pythons in the Everglades National Park, that's a problem. And most people now believe it was an intentional introduction by an importer. I mean, it had to be. If somebody took a large number of them and dumped them in one spot near there, that's just how it is. Could have been Hurricane Andrew. I was present at a facility, the one that a lot of people talk about that was destroyed in Hurricane Andrew. That's the guy I got my blood boas from. He was a personal friend of mine. And I was at that facility both before and after Hurricane Andrew flattened it. And I mean, when I say flattened it, I finally was able to get down there like a week or two after Hurricane Andrew, and I had to help him flip his cars over because they were flipped upside down.
Wow.
And his office was a walk-in freezer that we couldn't find. And I don't know if you're familiar with walk-in freezers, but this thing was big, and it was full of office equipment. We found it 3 miles away in a farmer's field.
Wow.
Jeez.
Miles. So that's the kind of destruction they were looking at. Now, his facility was a open-air Quonset hut system, which is just greenhouses, and the entire thing was gone. All the animals in it were gone. And we really didn't have any warning for that hurricane. That hurricane crawled up our ass really fast. I was living in Miami at the time. They kept telling us, it's just going to be a tropical storm, which is why I don't put any faith anymore in that, because multiple times they've said, it's not going to be anything. Hurricane Andrew, I initially had prepared only for a tropical storm, which is basically nothing. I was expecting a wet day with a little wind.
Mm-hmm.
And as the day progressed, the news kept changing. It's a Cat 1 now, and then an hour later it was a 2, and then 3, and then a 4, and then finally it turned into the monster that slammed into us. So nobody really had much time to prepare for that. So they managed to bag up most of the animals, and they put them in what they thought was a safe place, which was a house that was on the property on site, and that house was completely flattened as well. That particular place was ground zero for Hurricane Andrew, which is also subsequently where the pythons. Now, I had been collecting wild African rock pythons since I was 15 years old, but I used to catch them on canal banks in what is Medley, Florida, which is also where this place called Pet Farm used to be, which is a big importer in the 70s to 90s. And that canal that was located in that area was loaded with stuff. I mean, I caught rock pythons and tons of iguanas and tegus and amoebas. Not the kind of tegus that are there now, though. They were gold tegus, which never really got out. So all that stuff is really a part of importers that had dumped stuff, and now we are, and most importers don't dump stuff anyway. It's just a handful of, irresponsible people, and now we have these problems here that it's a little scary with the law they wrote because it's very open-ended. They have now set up a ban list with the caveat that they can add anything they want without having to really go through an oversight. So that is the more troubling part than the tegu ban, which is, again, it's a bad thing, but having that open-ended thing in the state that has, it's an enormous industry down here. One of the hubs for the entire trade. So it would be pretty catastrophic if they could just arbitrarily add anything. They found a blue-tongued skink in somebody's backyard. They're going to be invasive, and and then you next thing you know they're on the list. And I doubt it'll be that extreme, but I honestly didn't think we'd see a lot of the things we see now. So we just never know.
Mm.
But it looks like USARK is on it. They filed an injunction lawsuit against them today or this week.
Yeah, saw that.
Yeah, we're really lucky we have them. They are really our only line of defense. Against legislation, and I mean anybody can. Most of these politicians are very ill-informed, and we're still, even though we're as big as we are today, and I never thought this would ever be this way. We're still relatively small in the grand scheme of things. We're still very niche, and I mean, that's why we all know each other to some degree. I mean, if you're active at all in this, you know the guys' names, you know who they are, you see them at shows and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're just not to the level that some of the other, like the fish industry is like so much bigger than us and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Hopefully USARK will be able to beat them down, but they're probably in for quite a fight.
Mm-hmm.
So fun times, man.
So, let's say things down in Florida get a little fishier. They keep on putting things on lists, which very well could happen. Are you going to move to one of the colder states like Georgia and continue doing what you're doing, or you think you'll just kind of hang it up?
I'll be perfectly honest. If it wasn't for the fact that I couldn't get my family and Heather and them to move, I would have left this state a long time ago. I would rather live out west, to be perfectly honest. I don't know. I mean, I grew up here, but I went to San Diego. Alan Rapace flew me out in the early 90s, and man, I spent a week out there driving all over the place with him out there, and I was like, man, this is freaking badass. I would like to going out to the desert, and we went out to Sandfire Dragon Ranch, which was out in Bonsai, California, and man, I love that whole area. It's just it's dry and it's hills and there's lots of herps, and I don't know. I'm just tired of living in the swamp. So yeah, I could set up in anywhere along the southern border from Georgia. I mean, I could even pull this off if I had to in a cold climate by using basements and stuff like that. I probably wouldn't enjoy it as much, and I would probably just go really high end, a few projects that are like super high end stuff, Amazon basin emeralds and good monitors and stuff like that. But
so what you're saying is you wouldn't mind living in Jersey. It's good that you say that. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I could pretty much. I mean, I'm not really tethered to any one spot, honestly, as far as personally. I don't know. I'm ready to leave this state if I had to. I'm not. Like I said, if it wasn't for my elderly parents and stuff like that, where I try to stay relatively close to them so I can help them out. But if it wasn't for them, I probably would have packed up after I got divorced. If I hadn't met Heather and then stayed here, I actually considered going out west, Texas or New Mexico, one of those places. But my entire family structure is here, spread out between Palm Beach and Orlando. So my daughter's here and all that. So I'll make it work. I mean, they're never going to ban bearded dragons. Let's be honest. They're never going to ban blue-tongued skinks. Those things they're not going to happen. The things that I worry about are, varanids, all boas. I could see them, sneaking in, or getting something like that passed, because all these politicians are ignorant about this stuff anyway. They just see the same shit that the regular public sees with the media coverage on everything, and it's all very slanted, and they take a problem and they exacerbate the problem, and so they make regular people. I mean, if you look at the comments on news articles, man, that's the worst thing I've ever done. One of those, I'm like, why did I look at this?
Yeah.
I'm like, man, you're all just spewing shit. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. Most of it is just total bull crap.
It's a lost cause.
Yeah, it's a fight you can't win. So
you can't talk to those people.
Nope. That's the problem, man. People just don't. people don't research. They formulate opinions with no research because they heard it from somebody else. Man, I research everything. If you tell me something and I decide I will research that into the ground. I mean, that's pretty much probably my what's allowed me to be as successful as I have been with this industry, with the reptiles. But I mean, I do this for everything. I mean, I play World of Warcraft, which is an MMO video game, and I mean, I literally will research that and everything I get involved in with that until it's down to finite math things like that. So, yeah. I mean,
I was checking out some of your World of Warcraft posts on here, man. I'm kind of impressed, actually. Between that and some of the stuff I saw you post up music-wise, I was very surprised. Like you're posting Dillinger Escape Plan on your Facebook feed. I'm like, what's happening right now?
Oh yeah, dude. No, I've been a hardcore punk and metal fan since I was a kid, man. I actually had
nice.
After I had 2,000 over 2,000 CDs from pretty much every band that I've always been really into underground scenes, so I follow all the scenes. I was following the Seattle scene long before people knew who Nirvana and Alice in Chains were. I followed the scene in Georgia right now that has bands like Whores and a few other really good like punk metal kind of bands that are coming out of there. So yeah, I've always been really into that, man. If I'm not listening to a podcast, I've got loud shit in here.
Nice.
So yeah, I do that, and I've been a hardcore gamer my entire life. I mostly play MMO games these days. It's pretty hard to
EverQuest.
EverQuest.
14 years of my life wasted on that game.
Yeah, I played it from 99 to 2004.
Holy crap.
Hardcore, though. I mean, I was in the rating, and I played 10, 12 hours a day.
10, 12 hours, lightweight.
Yeah. Well, for me,
then he took care of the reptiles.
Yeah,
I wasn't in the reptiles then, so you're right. I got to calm down. I had the time to waste.
Yeah. Before that, I was pretty. I was Quake 2 and Doom and all those games, and
yeah.
Then a buddy showed up at my house one day. He's like, "You got to try this game, man. It's like Dungeons and Dragons, but it's online." And I was never really into D&D, and so I kind of left. He bought me the game EverQuest, and I left it sitting on my counter. And then one day, like a week or two later, I was bored, and I was like, "Yeah, let me see what this is." So I popped out the discs, and I popped it in my computer, and I set it up, and I log in, and there was like all these people running around. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I run off into the wilderness, and these skeletons and wolves were chasing me, and I'm running for my life. And I called my buddy. I'm like, "Dude, I don't know where I'm at. I got these things trying to murder me, and what the hell do I do?" He's like, "I'll be right there." So he logs in, and I run over the hill, and there's this dude standing there in a full rock.
Yeah.
He was a paladin, and he hit the wolf one time and killed it. I didn't know the zone or what you did, and it was like I was terrified, and I was playing a stupid video game, and I was literally, my chest was pounding, and that was it. I was freaking hooked.
And you woke up 6 years later. You're like, "What happened?"
Yeah, pretty much.
Did you start selling your characters? That's what I want to know.
I actually did. When I quit the game in 2004, I sold one character for $4,500.
Holy crap, that's a lot for a character, I feel like.
Yeah, I was in a high-end raiding guild at the time, so I had fully decked out rogue and a fully decked out druid.
Fully decked out rogue, you say?
Yeah.
What,
Ryan?
What,
Ryan and I play a bit of D&D, and he likes playing the rogue.
Yeah.
The reason I like playing the rogue is because the first character I ever rolled in EverQuest was a rogue, and it was the only one that I played for 13 years. Yep. Yamada. I was top 2 guilds on the server. Wasted a ton of time. Dave looks like he's about to throw a fit and go herping. I don't know.
I'm gonna walk over there and start flipping shit while you guys nerd out over here on video games.
Just out of curiosity, what server were you on?
What is it called? Raven or something like that?
I was on E-Release Mar.
I ended up transferring to a couple other servers once everything started winding down and it was getting condensed. So I kind of lost track of it, but
yeah, those games are great for doing this for a living because you have a lot. It's a lot of hurry up and wait shit with the reptile stuff. So you have a lot of downtime where you can't really leave, but you really don't have anything to do. So
I camped the quest for 4 days straight, called out of work, didn't sleep. It was a quest drop I needed. It was a random spawn that could skip. It was for a eye patch that would let you give haste to yourself.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that.
In some frozen wasteland, I can't remember now because it was so long ago. But
yeah,
I camped that thing forever. That griffin that I needed to get.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to take things off topic, guys.
No, you're fine. This is all part of it. We're past the 2-hour mark. This is the fuck about hour. We just
This is near and dear to my heart. Like, I would never sell Yamada. I haven't logged in to EverQuest for 10, 15 years now, and I will never sell that character because I will log in at some point. If the server's still up, I will log in at one point and say, hey, I'm back.
Yeah. Yeah, I do have regrets about selling those characters when I quit, but I at that point I was playing Final Fantasy Online for a year until WoW came out, and then once WoW came out, pretty much my entire guild from EverQuest transferred over, and we started.
That's what killed my guild.
Yeah, WoW was the thing, and I still play that damn game every day. I run all 6 tanks. And,
nice.
And now recently we're bored, so we're doing arena stuff and shit like that.
Mm.
But, yeah, when I'm not reptiling, I've got loud metal playing and video games going. So that's pretty much the entirety of me, all summed up into three things.
That's cool, man.
So
I'm gonna have to get a list from you. I'll email you after this to get a list of bands just to run through.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, depending on what
that.
If it's punk and metal, like I said, I had 2,000 CDs when I got divorced 3 years ago, and I basically spent 3 years couch surfing. I was homeless and living off of a couple of really good friends of mine that hooked me up, and while I was trying to figure out what I was going to do going forward. So I got tired of lugging around all these heavy ass boxes full of CDs, and I was like, man, I burned all this shit onto MP3s a long time ago. I really don't need these. So I made an eBay company and started selling them off, and then I realized, holy shit, people are willing to pay. Like I sold some CDs for $200 and $300, and I was shocked
because they only made short runs of them, and it was a band that most people didn't know, and you can't get them.
Yep,
I know.
I'm the guy buying that crap.
Yeah. I had the original Sam Haines CDs, Danzig's second band after the Misfits, and apparently they had not made those CDs in a while, and I threw them up online for like $9 starting bid for 7 days, and a couple of them closed out at like $180, $190.
Wow,
that's awesome, dude.
I was like shocked. So I still have 1,000 left to sell off. I've been kind of lax the last year about listing them because it takes a while to all that build out stuff. But
that's cool. Ryan and I have a funny story about a Misfits concert we went to.
Oh my god!
Not that long ago, but anyway. I do want to hear stories. I that's one of the things that I like to get into is stories. I did. There's still some more like monitor stuff I wanted to talk about, but let's hear stories because we're over the 2-hour mark. So you've been around for a long time. I don't want to get into Ryan. It's not Ryan and I time, but what is some of the crazy stories, from either shows or hanging out with Herp people? You don't have to name names, but if you do, it's fine. But just some crazy times. I mean, anything old school that you're like, this one time.
Benjamin wants to hear about the rock star lifestyle that it is to be a reptile breeder. He wants the rock star stories from.
I think that's what people like to hear.
Everybody was smuggling stuff in the 80s from Australia. Like,
yeah, I could tell you some stories about that, but I can't name names. But I was at
name names. That's fine.
I was at a place in the early '90s when a FedEx shipment showed up and had these giant poster rolls in it, and I was dropping off some animals, and this dude's like, "You're gonna want to see this." and he popped open the poster roll, and there was a 6-foot parenti in it. And I was like, oh my God. And
Wow.
I looked at my wife at the time, and I'm like, and she was like, no, do not even consider this. But I did get to take it out and hold it for a few minutes, and I was like, oh my God, this is so awesome.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I've seen shit like that over the years. I don't know. The cool thing, not really related to the reptile industry, but when I was 16, some friends of mine took a couple of metro buses, and we went out to this place called Westland Mall in Hialeah in Miami. And behind it was a canal that we knew had green iguanas on it. So we started walking, catching green iguanas, and all of a sudden the bushes exploded. And I was like, man, that's a huge green iguana. And when we pulled back the branches, there was a giant rhinoceros iguana sitting there on the ground.
Wow.
Which at the time they were stupid rare. Nobody was breeding them. And we ended up chasing it, and we ended up catching it. That was the first cyclura for me, and it was this massive thing, and so that was pretty cool. So, and over the years, I had caught 3 or 4 other rhino iguanas in Miami. So that was
wow.
I used to breed cyclura for a while, and that was how I got into that. I had always wanted those, and I had only ever seen them in books. Then around the early '90s, people started really having success breeding them. So now they're kind of common, but back then that was a big damn deal, especially to catch one. But yeah, I mean,
I'll call it in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the industry, I honestly kind of maintain relatively low profile. I generally show up at these shows, I do my shit, and then I get the hell out. Nobody sees me until the next day, and mostly because I'm just an introvert, and I don't know, I'm not really a party guy, so I'm not going to go and hang out with a whole. I mean, I like that sometimes, but it's not really my gig. So I really don't have a lot of those crazy stories. I've heard the crazy stories from the guys that live like rock stars in this business. But I mean, I know Kerry King from Slayer, and we've been friends since the '90s, and back in the day, he actually. So that's a pretty cool story. So a couple times over the years, like one day he showed up at my house, little Miami house, and he came by. He was in town. He wanted to see some shit, and then we got in this rental car of his, and we drove across the state and went to Mark Bell's place in the middle of the night. We woke Mark up at like 2 a.m. or some shit. Mark was still hanging out, and he gave us a tour. But it's a weird thing. Driving across the state of Florida with Kerry King from Slayer, somebody who I heard the first Slayer Show No Mercy album when I was in this little shitty record store in Miami called Discount Records, where they would, if you wanted to buy a record, they would rip it open and play it for you. And I was like, man, this is the most evil, fucked up thing I've ever seen. I really want to hear what this is. So the dude, he's like, oh yeah, you're going to dig this. And he opened it up and he put it on. And the opening song was Evil Has No Boundaries, and Tom Araya screams. And I said, stop right there, I'll take it. Just from that opening scream. So ever since then, I was like a huge fan. And when I met Kerry in 92, at 91 or 92, maybe it was 90. I don't remember. It was at one of the first Daytona shows. He was there with Lloyd Lemke. And I got to meet him there, and then we became friends, and we pretty much talked every day for a long time because he was all into the same shit I was into. So anyway, he shows up, and it's a weird thing, though, driving across the state of Florida with Kerry King, who has a severe sugar addiction at the time, and we literally stopped at like multiple gas stations so he could run in and get candy bars, and I was like in the back seat with my wife at the time, and I'm like, man, this is the weirdest shit, you know? It was just weird. And then a couple years later, though, I was fortunate enough. He called me up and he's like, hey man, I'm at the hotel in South Beach, come pick me up. I'm here for a Deaf Americans showcase for Deaf American. It's only for record executives, but you can come, and you can bring somebody if you want. So I brought my friend Caesar, and we went and picked him up at his hotel, and then we got in a bus with Tom Araya and Jeff Hanneman, all of them, and then we drove like 10 blocks away, and then had to walk through South Beach to get to this little shitty little boarded up place where I walked inside. It was Rick Rubin, was there. He was a big record producer, and
Mm-hmm.
but that day was this little private show in this little tiny place for these record executives and us, and we got to see Slayer play, but we also got to see the System of a Down before anybody knew who they were.
Oh, snap.
And we met all those guys, and Perry Farrell from Jane's Addiction was there. We got to hang out with him. And then I ended up making friends with this guy, Jeff Terzo, who now owns Overstayer Equipment, but at the time he was the guitarist for the band God Lives Underwater. That was got some radio play in the 90s. They were like a hybrid between, I would call them between Alice in Chains and Nine Inch Nails. It was kind of industrial grunge.
Uh-huh.
But he was also in the Reptiles, so we got to hang out, and then through him and Kerry over the years, I got to meet all these other bands, and I was on guest list for Ozfest multiple times. I hadn't paid for a show ever since I met Kerry, so I got to see a lot of cool bands. I got to watch System of a Down play in this tiny little room with just like 25 people.
That's freaking amazing, man.
Yeah, yeah, I owe Kerry a lot for that. And then pretty much whenever he would come in, he would call me and we'd hang out. And so I got to do some of that stuff. I got to hang out on tour buses and shit like that. So that was fun.
Apparently, I have squandered my reptile career because I haven't done any of that. Okay.
Yeah, man.
Ryan's like, I gotta get back into EverQuest. I gotta start listening more.
I am not meeting the right people.
Dude, all you got to do is take chances and do shit that other people aren't doing, and doors open. I mean, that really is. I mean, I've never done anything intentionally. I see cool shit, and then I look for stuff that other people aren't doing, and I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can make that cool, and so I do it, and with that has, I mean, it's been good to me. It's opened a lot of doors. I've gotten to do a lot of cool shit. So, I mean, I'm relatively happy considering, with what I've been able to do and the stuff and the doors open. I mean, I went 3 years ago. Like I said, I was fucking homeless, and I really didn't. And now I'm sitting here, and I literally behind me, outside on the other side of that wall, is everything I ever wanted to work with. So
that's awesome, man.
I took advantage of it, and this will allow me to build my own colonies of these things over time. So
that's cool.
I mean, all that the only reason I had that, I think, more than anything, I think most people I think everybody that breeds reptiles can breed anything. It's just, you just gotta, pick some stuff. But more than anything, I think it's just don't always do what everybody. I mean, there's some, like, I follow the trends, and I do, like I said, I work at the Crested Geckos. You got to do some of that, but you also got to at least have one thing that you're doing that is different than everybody else is doing, and eventually, it gets you noticed, and then it opens doors, and then cool shit happens. And like, I met Kerry King because of the blood boas. That was the thing. So he opened that door. When I met him, he already had known about it, which I was shocked. I was talking to Kerry King. I'm like, oh, I'm a huge fan. I just seen him 2 weeks before at the Clash of the Titans show that was in Miami with Anthrax, Slayer, and that was Alice in Chains, one of their first things. They called Facelift, and Megadeth. And like 2 weeks later, I got to meet him. And then when I met him, and he knew about the blood boas, and I was like, holy shit, this is fucking badass. Kerry King knew who I was. And I was this little, like, 21-year-old shit at the time. And, it was pretty funny, man. So, I don't know.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
I always say, if it wasn't for this hobby, I'd live a very boring life. The people
Right.
you meet, the fun stories, the animals, like, I love everything about this hobby. I don't know what else I'd do with myself if I wasn't doing this.
Yeah, I agree. I think all of us are the same in that regard. I think, if you're hardcore enough to be on a podcast or hosting a podcast, then we're all the same. We're all a bunch of fuck ups that like reptiles and are weird and, whatever, man. I'm good with that. I mean,
nerd out and all this weird stuff, but it's super cool to us, man.
Right. Everything that I'm into puts me in a weird category. I'm a freaking 51-year-old video gamer that plays MMOs, and I listen to music that probably pisses my neighbors off, and I play around with lizards all day. So it's weird, when you go and hang out with normal people, you really don't have a whole fuck of a lot to talk about. They're all talking about this other stuff, and I'm sitting here thinking, man, I wonder if my lace monitors are breeding right now. And
yeah,
I'm thinking about if your lace monitors are breeding right now. Like,
they've actually been doing that a lot. Once the rain started the last couple of weeks, and they're pretty much constantly copulating. So I'm pretty sure one of them is female. It's just clear to me that she's definitely gravid now. And then
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna jump back a little bit into reptiles, do you handle your monitors a lot?
I don't handle them, but I interact with them, similar to kind of what Crutchfield does.
Okay.
Build trust with them. They're a lot like dogs. Once you have that trust and that rapport with them, I can go in there and okay, here's a good example. Like 2 days ago, one of the Mertens monitors laid a clutch of infertile eggs, and I was in the bin inside their enclosure, bending down, digging through the bin looking for the eggs. And I felt something tickle the top of my head, and I looked up, and there was the two male Mertens that live in the cage were both sitting right there licking my head, putting their tongue on my head. They weren't going to hurt me or anything like that. They were like, hey, man, you got food for me? And, so that's the kind of, like the lace, I'll go in there and I'll open the door, and they'll come up to the door, and then I pet them and stuff like that. But picking them up, especially when, a lot of them are just too big, like the black throats, I don't even know how much those things weigh. They must weigh north of 80 pounds.
Yeah.
The ones I have are just massive. And, yeah.
Big claws.
Yeah, you can't really pick them up, and if you do, they accidentally they hurt you with their claws and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I do interact with them a lot. That's probably one of the best things about having them, to me, anyway, is the whole building the rapport and then having them come to you when you go out there. It's like super rewarding, and you don't get that with a lot of herps. A lot of herps are, especially smaller stuff, they just hide. You have a little bit of interaction, but monitors are on a whole different level. Tegus are more of I don't even know what to say about them. I mean, they're real tame if you have them inside, but when you keep tegus outside in the heat, they are not that animal. And when you open those cages, usually it's an airborne mouth, coming at you, because the feeding response is just absolutely insane. And they will test bite your hands, whereas monitors will not do that. They'll go up and they'll check it. And if it's you, they don't do anything. If you're holding a rat, they'll gently take it out of your hand. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I think the first time I ever got to interact with big monitors was at Nerd with Kevin, and I remember we're in the room and we got all these giant water monitors around us, and there's a big tray of rats just thawing out, and he opens up the door and he's like, yeah, just put your fist in its face and it'll lick your hand, and then pet its chin and you're good to go. And I'm all like, I'm looking at the rats, I'm looking at what's going on, like, I'm not really buying this. I'm like, I believe you, I'm a little scared. And he went in and did it, and then we did the same thing. And like you said, gentle can be extremely intelligent.
Yeah, he's done a lot of amazing work with us, and actually, he kind of I've known him forever, but watching what he's done with them has kind of got me back in the monitor thing, because I saw what he was able to do as far as getting them all tame and socializing, and then. So I started listening to the stuff he was saying, and I was like, man, a lot of this is really spot on. This is like good stuff. So because the whole thing I was concerned about with selling big monitors is that I was afraid that I would eventually create my own problem, where if you're selling a bunch of monitors that end up being these giant aggressive things, and then somebody gets hurt, or and some of the people that buy them are people that shouldn't probably have them anyway. They're buying them for the wrong reasons, or they're not really experienced enough. They're definitely not something that oh yeah, that thing.
Sorry, I just saw this thing come up and I was like, oh snap.
Yeah, that's one of those little water tegu things. I forget what they're.
crocodile tegus.
Crocodile tegus, yeah. It's a small, semi-aquatic teat from that region. They're kind of cool. Not really something I kept caiman lizards for a while. I've always wanted that, but the whole snail eating thing, and I was just like, But they, I don't know. But yeah, Kevin did a lot of really amazing shit with the water monitors in particular. He's one of those guys that thinks outside the box, and he always has. And sometimes that gets him into trouble, but more often than not, that's how you make advancements. If you just constantly parrot and copy everybody else, you're not going to go anywhere. And I think as an a lot of us do that, where we have a lot of really intelligent people. Most of the people that do this are, we're all kind of nerds, and the people those are smart guys. I mean, it's clear that all three of you are all smart. So, I mean, we shouldn't, if we collectively, worked on, thinking outside the box on different things, we might seriously push it, because it's not going to be a guy like me, one guy that's going to do this, or 10 guys. It's going to be a combination of somebody somewhere is going to have a different look than, like, I get tunnel vision all the time. I get caught doing a certain thing a certain way, and then I don't see the things that could be better. Like, I've had Heather come by and just say, "Oh, why don't you do it this way?" And then I'm like, "No, because I do it that way." And then I think about it, I'm like, "Son of a bitch, that's her way's probably better than the way I was thinking about it." But I always did it a certain way, and that's so. I don't know. Again, I'm just rambling. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
No, you do. And yeah, reptile expert all day long. And I will say this, in my opinion, and I'm always really driven to get guests on that have been doing this for a while. And I feel the problem with, like, the new generation of breeder, and I'm going to throw myself in that same classification, because even though I've been, actively doing this since like 2002 and catching reptiles all my life, I still feel like I'm wet behind the ears with everything. And, the difference between the old school guy and guys like me and guys that got in after me is we were told how to do things. You guys had to figure out how to do things. So a lot of us try to adopt somebody else's way, where you guys created your own way. And that's, my favorite part about these conversations. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You kind of have to find your own, and, everything said and done, paying attention to the animals is going to tell you everything. But yeah, so that was a little bit of an ass kiss, but the reality is, it's guys like you, like just one ass kiss an episode. Yeah, like you, Vin Russo talking to him, Graziani, even Graziani talking about with his girlfriend how she's having him do things differently than he would have thought to do it. Just a fresh set of eyes on an old way of doing things. So no, like I said, that's we emphasize on this enough doing the show. I want everyone's experiences on here. I love talking skinks with 10 different people in here in 10 different ways. I think it's better for everybody in the hobby to have these opportunities, because, like I said, with my generation, in my opinion, we don't all do the research like you guys had to. So, yeah.
No, I mean, honestly, though, I'm actually probably, I view it pretty much the way you view it. I still always feel like the more I know about this stuff and the more I learn, the more I realize that I really don't know shit. So it's kind of like, so I never stop researching. But I mean, even back then, we had a little bit less technology. Like you guys now, there's all these, this industry that's built up around it. But it's really not any different. And even today, I find that I rarely, utilize any of that. And again, I had a body of work though to draw on myself. I had Bill Love and Bob Clark and a whole list of biologists. I've always kind of tended to go more to the academic side to look for answers than I do to the other herpetoculturists, except, I mean, I do obviously pull some stuff from them too, but the reason I do that more than anything is because I'm always looking for a different way to do something, or my own way. I like to, so I mean, I learn so much on a regular basis from, a myriad of people people, some herpetoculturists, but a lot of biologists too. I mean, those guys literally they will find something, about an animal, and then you'll read it, and those research papers, and then you're just like light bulbs just go off. You're like, oh man, that explains some of the problems. Because I feel like we're still very much in the infancy. I think that we have a long way to go as an industry anyway, or a hobby, whatever. So I mean, there's just I don't know, but yeah, I've been at this, like I said, since for 30 some years, and dude, I don't know shit. I know less today. I was much more certain about things 20 years ago than I am today, because I've seen things that just that blew apart my idea on that, because now this is happening and stuff like that. So I don't know, but I appreciate it. But yeah, it's I don't know. You guys are doing a great job, though. I mean, having these podcasts, this is a wealth of information. Like, I listen to pretty much all of the reptile podcasts that are out there on a regular basis. I didn't know about you guys until you approached me to be on the show, and then I looked and I was like, oh shit, and you had a bunch of good guests, and so I've been watching those as I get a chance, and but yeah, I mean, all you guys collectively are building a body of work here that's substantial, because having people that do stuff talking about it is very valuable. So,
yeah, we tend to only share information inside of our little bubble. So like trying to get it out there to the masses is really,
yeah, and that's gotten me in trouble from over the years. People thought I was giving out. I used to get yelled at all the time for giving out what I thought were, formulas. I was like, okay, well, this is how you do this thing, because they're like, oh, you shouldn't be sharing that, because now there's more people are going to do it. And I'm like, but yeah, but that's the point. You really, when it's just a handful of people doing it, nobody's going to want to invest any money in that, because you need to have everybody collectively doing this. And it doesn't I've never really found competition to be particularly painful. I mean, generally competition's good. It'll kick my ass and make me actually try. If I don't have any competition on something, I'll just,
aside from banana ball pythons, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, competition's good, and more people involved. This is one of those things where the more people that get involved in it, generally is a plus rather than a minus.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm a huge fan of a lot of herpers. I mean, I keep track of everybody that I think is doing notable stuff, and I watch them through Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and I'll sometimes share if they do something that's really notable, and I share it around, because I feel like we're all the same. We're all in the same boat, and we're all doing the same thing, because we all love this shit, and that's really what it's about.
Absolutely.
And there's one of the things that benefits. So something I didn't think about getting into this, we're like, oh, we want to share information. We want to share. But if you're listening at this point still, if people go back and they listen to all the podcasts we've done so far because of who we've had on, there's a lot of trends that, people that have been doing this for a long time are talking about, and you'll see these trends through these podcasts, and you can start to develop like things that we've never worked with. I feel like we'll have a little bit more success because if we start listening to all the different things and seeing where the trends cross, and I feel like if we don't share the information with other people, we'll never see where those trends all cross. And if we can line up all the trends, maybe we'll start unlocking some of the species out there that are just like been elusive lately,
Yeah.
About Bolin's pythons. I mean,
I agree. I think Keith and these guys that are really working on the Bolin's thing are doing something pretty amazing, and I hope that at some point they all get it all. I'm sure that with that animal, it's going to be something stupid. It really is. It's going to be something that's right there, that it's always that way. Every time I've ever run into a really hard problem with this stuff, it always ends up being something simple, and usually it's because we're just overcomplicating it, because we're trying too hard to find what it is, and it's generally just something that's so obvious, but no one sees it because everybody's expecting it to be something deep when it's really something simple. I don't know what it is, and I mean, I can't believe that it's that different. To me, looking at where they come from, and Bolins were one of those things that when my investors, we actually thought about that. We were going to we were going to buy a big group of those and go after that hard, because that's one of the bucket list animals that I do not currently have.
Mhm.
But I went away from that because after I read Ari's book and started looking at the stuff that they were saying, and I realized
It's too warm.
It's
Yeah.
cold. It's cold as fuck, and they probably need to be kept cold. It's probably really going to be a cold thing. Cold and wet seems to be the answer for them. And that runs counter to how we keep stuff. You know, the idea of keeping something cold and wet just totally, I mean, even I am getting anxiety thinking about it when it comes to a reptile. People are thinking, respiratories and shit like that. But I have a feeling that with that animal, that probably is what it is. Is that they
Cold, wet, and lean.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing. Yeah. I mean, all this stuff with monitors, if your females are not super heavy and your males are not very lean, you don't get anything. And it's also possible maybe they don't, if you're not giving them the proper nesting site, maybe they're not that different from monitors. Maybe if they don't feel like
Oh God, it's over, guys.
maybe they feel like if they don't have a proper nesting site, maybe they just won't.
So that's one of the, and we talk about Bolins and none of us have kept them, but one of the things that we watched Ari talk about them before, and one of the things that it will never leave my mind, when they find the eggs, they're in these like really humid, like leaf litter almost under the ground, not like solid dirt, but like kind of. And then when you were like talking about termite mounds, if we had a box that's full of leaf litter or cocoa fiber or something like that was humid but not wet, not like standing water wet, but humid.
Yep.
I bet that would be a piece of it. Dave,
Yep.
We lost battery, so he's off probably for now. But
he tends to lose battery the same time every episode. I don't know what's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, it is probably something like that. And I have absolutely no doubt that those guys that are working on it are the best guys to be on it. I think they're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then it's one of those things. It's been hit or miss. Some people have gotten lucky here and there. And I just, it could be a lot of things. I mean, I hear all these things. There's a lot of hypotheses, it's whatever, thrown around. And some of them I think could be. Some of them I think probably not. And I think sooner or later somebody's gonna get the right combo, and then boom, it's gonna jam, and then all of a sudden they're gonna go from being this difficult thing to all over the place, and everybody that wants them will eventually get them. And but it's probably gonna be a cold, high humid, wet snake. Not, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Super. Because everything that when I read those accounts and he was talking about freezing his ass off in the pouring rain, it's about as alien as a python setup that you could. I mean, it's like counter to everything that we do with them.
Yep.
So I'm like, yeah, this is probably where it is. And they're black more than likely, so they can take advantage of whatever sun peeks through the clouds and quickly get their body temperatures up. And so it's the anti-carpet python is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, absolutely. Well, since Dave's off and we're plenty of time on this podcast, we've been talking about maybe clipping them up and having like an audio only version that's full and stuff like that. Why don't we just start talking about a couple of things that Ryan and I are into? Like, I mean, so do you build your own computers? Games or like, I mean.
I have done that in the past. The one I'm running right now, I have an Alienware laptop and an iBuy Power.
Sure.
I haven't bought one in like 3 years, but my computers are getting a little long in it too. But in the past, I had built. I mean, I can't personally build them. Let me rephrase that. I am terrible with mechanical shit. But I have lots of friends that are techies that work in the computer industry. So I will call them up and say, hey, I need a new PC, and they will tell me what to buy, and then they slap it together for me.
I'm into that.
Just like Christian does for Ben.
That's
a personal jab. Sorry about that.
I build my own computers.
I'm going to tell him we're going to timestamp this 2:42 Christian Nutella, check that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's a good time. I mean, but I used to play Warcraft 3 a lot.
I too love that game, dude.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And when it went online and you're like, oh man, I could play a friend, in single combat, if you will. You're like, this is cool. But then when they started having arena style Warcraft 3, which is what spawned, StarCraft and then ultimately World of Warcraft, I was like, wow. And I was hooked and I was playing like 8 hours a day for like months and months at a time. And, and I was doing all the stuff. And then we were like, this is too much. We need to calm down. My friend and I, and we got into a game called Tribal Wars, which isn't an MMO. It's online and it's still around, but it's text based. So it's a GUI, but it's like real time. So if you have an army, you send it to the next village over to attack it. It doesn't show you anything but it'll show you a timestamp. And it actually, if it takes 3 days to get there, it takes 3 days to get there. So you could time things. You'd like send one guy to attack and you'd look at the time and, retrieve them. And then you'd have to log on at like 2:30 in the morning to send this attack from these different villages. And you'd write down all these different times and you'd send them all. And you're like, And so I played for 2 years straight, one single game, because it's never off. Like it's always on. So I played it.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, it's fun. But then after that, I was like, I can't do this. I can't live this way. I totally stayed away from World of Warcraft. I just couldn't do it. I was like, if I get into it, it's over. Like, I'm not going to ever get up. So I had to make that choice back then.
it definitely takes a level of the self-control because, again, like, wow, you can pretty much log. There's always something going on. And yeah, I don't know, man. For the first 2 years of World of Warcraft, me and a group of friends ran the #1 Horde guild on Casmodan, on that server, and that was like a full-time job to keep.
Oh yeah,
you had to have a roster of over 200 people to be able to field 40 for the raids at any given time. We raided 5 nights a week, mandatory, 4 hours a night, and then there was hours done previous to that. That was how we stayed #1. But after doing that for a couple of years, I realized, man, this just isn't worth it. It's too much. I mean, it's like another job, and it was cool to be able to brag. But I mean, who the hell are you going to brag to? Hey, I got the #1 Horde guild on.
Right.
People are looking at you like you pathetic nerd,
Yeah.
So eventually we hit a wall and the thing broke up. And now I play a couple hours a night with a small group of friends I've been playing with forever, and they have like Mythic Plus and shit like that, stuff that gives you the competitive it satisfies the competitive aspect enough that you can get it out in a couple hours and then be done with it. And recently just went back to PvP and again, which I'm digging that, doing arenas and stuff. And
we have a friend who's like semi-pro, I would call it, I guess, in Dota.
Oh yeah.
And he kept on nagging me to play. And finally one day I was like, all right, I'm just gonna play it a little bit. And I started getting into it. I'm like, oh, I know what this is like. This was built off of Worldcraft 3's Hero. I mean, that's exactly what it is. Exactly what it is. And I was like, oh, I can get into this. I played it a little bit and I was like, I better not.
Dota's hardcore, man. I tried that a couple of times. I got my ass handed to me. I was like, well, that's it. I played Heroes of the Storm for a while, which was Blizzard's, and I still will play that every once in a while. I like that, but Dota was built off of that mod. It was originally a mod for Warcraft 3. I used to play that when it was. I was an undead. My thing in Warcraft 3 was undead, and I used the forget what it was, a rush where you eventually got your frostworms out as quick as possible, and then you just raised everything. And oh man, I love that. That was the best, man.
I liked playing the underdog stuff, so I'd be the humans a lot. And so like nobody wanted to be humans, and I'm like, they
were on the shit end of the stick of that.
Yeah, but you could send out 2 or 3 just soldiers quicker than any other race.
Yeah.
And so you'd make a soldier and send it.
To harass.
And if you found their town, you're gonna kill their peasants, and all of a sudden you'll win with 1 or 2, like human soldiers, and you're like, you have to get lucky that you find their town quicker than they can make any other thing. But freak, man, you didn't get that. It was like uphill battle.
Yep. Yeah, I was pretty hardcore on Warcraft 3. That and Diablo are what really got me into Blizzard games, and then and now I pretty much at the moment I only have time for a few, so I've only been playing Blizzard games. They have that launcher that has all their shit, but I have like 200 games on Steam, some of which I've never even opened.
Yeah.
And they come out and I'd be like, oh, that looks good, and I buy it. And then I was recently playing the new Doom. That's pretty freaking badass.
Is it?
That was a surprise. Yeah, I mean, Doom, the one that came out a few years ago, not the one just before, but the one prior. I think it was in 2000 or 2004, whatever it was. That one was kind of a disappointment, but this one kept getting good reviews, so I bought it, and I was like, wow, I couldn't put it down. It's like old school Doom, but with modern tech and lots of like cool shit. I mean, it's It's a good game.
Do you ever play? I don't know. I may have missed something while I was in the bathroom, but have you ever tried any of the VR platforms?
We didn't talk about it now.
No. Actually, my daughter's husband just bought one of those yesterday, actually, and she was telling
me. Which one? Which one?
Don't say Oculus.
It's an important question.
I want to say it's an Oculus.
I
think he bought the Rift. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a fine system. It's a fine system.
It's cute, I guess.
I'm down, Ben.
What's the better one?
The Valve Index is definitely number 1.
Well, the Valve Index now, I mean,
yeah.
Who in the world has one of those?
I have one that I don't even know where to play right now because I filled up my freaking room with skinks and I don't have any area to play it anymore.
It is.
Is the Valve the one that has the new Half-Life on it? Is that what that?
Yeah. It's Half-Life Alexa. It's got the finger-sensitive controllers.
I think that's the one he bought because he was screaming about head crabs. I could hear him, like we were playing WoW last night doing arena, and he was screaming in the background every time she'd hit push to talk on that about head crabs. I'm pretty sure that's the one he was playing. So he may not have gotten the Rift. He may have.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, he's a big Valve guy anyway.
The controllers that they came up with to track every single finger motion, while you don't even have to hold onto anything, is really important for VR for sure.
Yeah, that's going to be a weird thing, man, once that becomes more prevalent. And that's, I think, a couple of years from now, that's going to be the primary way all of us game. I could see that in an MMO being pretty damn.
If people could, afford, there's like huge money barrier because you have to have a high-powered PC and then you have to buy a high-powered VR set on top of it and then you have to buy the games on top of it. So there's like that huge barrier to entry. If you could get past that and then get people into it just long enough so they get fit enough to play it for 3 hours, because it is definitely a workout. Like try playing Skyrim in VR for more than an hour. Being a gamer that's like, a couch potato, you're going to die.
Try to play boxing for 5 minutes. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, the Wii boxing.
We have a
Wii in VR.
There's a VR boxing.
For real, because it knows where you are. So you got to move. You punch. It knows your motions. So if you miss, and you get hit. So you play, and you're like, oh, crap. And you take off the mask, and you're like, drenched. You're like, what the freak was I thinking?
Yeah, I can imagine that in Skyrim. I logged a shit ton of hours on Skyrim.
I almost got hooked on Skyrim.
You will play Skyrim so long in VR that you wake up the next morning, and it's like you did 5 hours at the gym of heavy lifting. And you're like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? I can't do You're going to die.
I wouldn't go to a gym, but I'd do that.
Yeah. So that's the hurdle you got to get over. First of all, you got to make it cheap enough for everybody to be able to get. and then you got to make it addictive enough that everybody gets fit enough to do it.
Yep.
Which is probably not bad for society.
No, it's really not. I was just thinking that. I'm like, man, and that would get me off my ass.
You need a little space, and we've all like said, you know, we're going to get into it for the exercise, and it's tough with the space for us at the moment.
Yeah.
I bought all the setup. I did everything. I played it a bit, broke a couple lights and a fan, and I broke things in the room because it was just not really big enough. Yet you're shooting a bow and arrow, and something flies over your head, and you shoot it, and you feel glass hit your face.
Oh my God!
For some reason,
right?
That's the whole problem. If they say you need like a 5x5 space, but really you need like a 10x10x12 space. That's what you really need. That's to be comfortable. They have this a system set up where you can do it wirelessly, and you can. So you like, if you did it right, you could go outside into your backyard and wander around for about 15 yards in any direction and be good. But then you're out in the heat and all that stuff. And I don't know if you've had VR goggles on before, but they get real hot. So
but I mean, the reality is though, you're having a good time and you forget a lot, because if you get the right system, your brain gets tricked enough to immerse you, and you start thinking the wrong, like the common problem that happens to everybody. They're like, this isn't real. I get it's not real. And they'll be playing something and you're ducking and you're doing a thing and it's not real. I know. But the very first time you're bending down on your knee and you put your hand out to put it on the counter in front of you to help yourself up and it's not there, you realize you've been tricked. Like it's in. You're like, that's it. So it's video game looking, but it's real enough that you're like, you know.
No, you definitely get tricked.
Yeah,
there's some level of your brain that gets tricked into thinking that you're there.
About that.
We'd love to have you over and play, and like, I mean, if we were anywhere near you, you'd be hooked. If you played it once, you'd be hooked.
That's what I'm afraid of. Yeah,
it's not a bad thing.
We have like a circle of like 6 friends that have experienced this before. At least half of them have almost gone unconscious from banging their head against the wall. Because they have a giant like skeletal like warrior coming at them and they dive across the room, but there's like only 1.5 feet of space and they dive into the wall, or or like these robotic crazy people are trying to shoot you with guns and you're trying to pick up your gun that fell on the floor because you dropped it and you smash your head into like this happens. You're in it. You're in it to win it inside VR.
That's pretty awesome, though, man. That really, while you're sitting.
Oh, it's great.
What is the actual barrier as far as cost to get into that?
You need a decent PC, so that's the biggest cost of it, to be honest.
If you're gonna want to do it, you're gonna spend your PC. What kind of video card do you have?
You said it's an Alienware laptop.
Yeah, that's not the one I'm on now. Right now, I'm on my desktop. I can't remember what's in the Alienware has an SLI combo, but I can't remember what's in that thing.
That sounds like enough. If you got, I wouldn't like. We are VR snobs because of a certain friend of ours, but if you wanted to get into the middle range of it, you could spend $400 on the Oculus Rift, which is not a bad system. Get access to probably 70% of the content, and you'd have a great time.
How much is the Valve one?
The one I just got, the newest one, is $1,200.
No shit.
Yeah, but it is.
You can get the Vives for like $600 or something like that now, right?
You can get a Vive for what is it, $499 or $599, which is not a bad system.
Yeah, the Vive that's what I have, and it's great. If you've never been in it,
you'll get blown away for sure on a Vive.
No shit.
Yeah. But like, it'll have the touchable controls, but it senses your hand motions, it senses your head motion, and you can get the wireless setup for the headset. Like,
yeah, that's the goal. The Vive, you can get wireless, so you're not tethered to a wire that you're twisting up around you all day. The newest one can't push it over wireless yet, so we're still waiting for the wireless console to come out for that.
Yeah, that. When I started seeing that pop up a few years ago, I thought, oh, this is where it's going. This is. I have a feeling that's probably the days of doing the PC like we do it now are coming to an end pretty quickly. I think that VR thing is just gonna.
It's getting pretty close. Like they have Google put out this wireless network that they can push over 5G. Like you don't even have to have the PC anymore. It just has to come over a wireless headset that you attach to it. Mm-hmm. So like within the next 5 to 10 years, that's where it's going to be at. You're not going to need the PC. That's not going to be the barrier. You're going to have a wireless headset that hooks up to the super fast wireless, and they're going to push off of a cloud computed mainframe kind of thing all the games.
Yeah, the day a new MMO comes out for that will probably be the absolute day that I will absolutely buy into that.
You'll never be back in the real world again.
That's what I'm afraid of.
There's plenty though to do, and Ryan, we've tested it out on a wide range of people. I don't need to say exactly what Ryan does for a living, but we tested it out on a wide range of people, from little kids, like I've had my nieces and nephews get in it, to people in their like 60s and 70s that aren't into video games at all. And every single time, maybe one or two people were like, but I'm talking 99% of the time, they're like blown away. Yep. And even the simple games are like super fun. Like I'm a huge bow and arrow guy. I just really enjoy it. And there's games where you have to pull the arrow out of your, and you're like, all right, and you pull it and you set it, and you're just doing this, man, like flying through
for like 2 hours straight.
And I'll go. I seriously, I've been in them where you get online with like 30 people, and you're basically playing a tower defense, where just hordes of enemy are coming in, and you got to defend. You got to defend the keep, and that's it. And it's just like, and you can there's when you hold a certain button and you shoot, it teleports you to where that arrow goes, so you can get down on the field, and then you're just firing away. You get up on a cliff, and you're just firing away. And the more you push back the horde, the more you can like get into their lair and conquer them. Dude, you're like 4 hours goes by.
And stuff. So that one hits. That's right there. That really. I didn't know they had that stuff.
Oh yeah,
even like the dungeon crawls. Like what was that one where you're the one I was talking about with the skeletons and stuff?
I forget the name of that one.
They have dungeon crawler VR games.
Oh yeah,
you're crawling a dungeon and you have to figure out the traps, and then you have to fight the big bad guys and all this stuff. Like, and you're going through, and they're not real long because it takes a lot of energy to But like if you played out the whole campaign through, you'd be like an hour and 45 minutes if you didn't die, maybe an hour and a half. But like,
and it's real mechanics. So it's not like aim and shoot and you're gonna hit the guy. It's
100% skill based.
Like you have to
hold the bow and arrow. You have to swing the sword. You have to duck and use your shield. Like
and you can look around corners, like, and then you can like shoot around a corner. And you're like, oh wait, I can for real do that in a video game?
Fuck yeah, man, that's badass, dude. I will eventually take that plunge. It may end up being sooner than later now that you guys have poisoned me with.
Once you go to your son-in-law's house, it's gonna be over.
Tower defense. I'm like, holy shit! Now I got to figure out how to get it.
Yeah, wasn't tower defense one of the best World of Warcraft mods? I mean, come on.
Yeah,
I can play tower defense now for hours.
Yeah, I used to play this tower defense game called The Orcs Must Die, and it was a stupid, simple little game. I was so addicted to that thing. It was just so much fun to set the traps and watch them all melt. And yeah, I dig that, man. That's the kind of shit I like, man. That's metal awesome stuff, dude.
Yep.
I'm all about that.
It's a shame we lost Dave.
Huh?
It's a shame we lost Dave. He'd be like,
he doesn't know what's going on. This is not his world.
Yeah. That's cool, man. Hey, well, it's been 3 hours. I think we should probably wrap up if you're all right with that.
Yeah, man, I'm good.
And I'll email you because I want to get a list of bands for real. And we can maybe chat if you have questions about, VR stuff. We're into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys ever want me to come back or anything like that, man, anytime. All you got to do is drop me a line, let me know, and I'll be here.
For sure,
right.
man.
So,
as a side note, do you listen to podcasts on like an app more so than you do YouTube?
yeah, mostly on my phone, on my Apple.
So you do Apple iPlay, like an
Yeah.
iPod?
Yeah, but I mean, I use them all. I'm actually probably going to switch over to Spotify now because I'm getting a little tired of. There's a with all the shit that's going on with. I saw Rogan switched over and he's going to be exclusive on Spotify now and stuff like that. And I listen to his show every day pretty much. Plus he's got an MMA guy on there.
Yeah,
I'm not really into that, but he gets a lot of like really amazing guests and he does. That's what you guys are doing. I like that long 2-3 hour because you can really get a lot of good information. The quick soundbite shit with 20 minutes or something, man, nothing comes out of that. But
yeah.
so this is definitely the way to go, and that's what I really like.
Yeah, we think so too. We're now starting to think about the platform. Maybe we're gonna switch over so that because people have asked us for the audio version.
Yeah,
so they can just listen to it. Because like YouTube, you can't lock your phone and put it on your hip, and it still play. You know. So
yeah, the YouTube thing. Yeah, that's funny because a friend of mine, Eddie Soto, was here earlier today. He's Serpentera. He produces like these rare. You know who he is?
I've heard the name. Yeah.
Okay, well, he was here today, and we were talking. And I told him I was going to be on here, and when I told him he's on YouTube, he was like, shit, it's a pain in the ass for me to listen to that." And I was like, "Yeah, I know, but they've already got it." So he had actually was going to go and check you guys out, but yeah, the one person that I mentioned it to said that, and I just leave my phone run with the YouTube, but yeah, it is a pain in the ass if the phone switches off or something, then you lose it and you got to start it and stuff like that. So. Yeah, I mean, I've always been using the Apple one up until this point because I had the iPhone, but I think all those, pretty much NPR and everybody, they go through. They're all on iTunes.
Yeah.
Joe, Port City Python, he's on there.
Yeah.
So.
Port City Pythons.
Yeah.
I like him. He's a cool dude.
So. Yeah, man. I mean, the podcast thing's great. I listen to podcasts for everything that I'm into, from WoW to fucking UFO shit, whatever, man. You
do strike me as a UFO guy. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I'm not one of these, not gonna get abducted, but I listen to this podcast called The Black Vault, which is done by a guy that actually does like intelligent UFO stuff, on stuff, and then he actually tries to disprove that they're actually UFOs. But ever since the New York Times articles and the Popular Mechanics articles and stuff on it, that really kind of seeing all the footage and hearing what these military guys, that kind of changed my for a long time. I mean, there's nothing in my brain that says that all that shit out there is not populated with stuff. Whether or not it can actually get here is another story, but
correct. I'm with you there.
But I kind of have to. And the problem is that it's just like everything else. There's always a whole bunch of crackpots that are the loudest, but there are a handful of very credible, unexplained things. And I think that at some point, I mean, we really don't know shit about anything. I mean, hell, we have moons not that far away around Saturn and Jupiter that have oceans. The thing that you have to wonder is what's underneath that ice. I mean, if there is an ecosystem there could be things right here in our own backyard, theoretically speaking, that are relatively close. You could actually have an entire civilization of things living under those ice in those oceans. I mean, why does it have to be terrestrial?
Right.
Be in the Goldilocks zone. Things on Earth live in every single niche.
Yeah.
Probably the way it works everywhere else too. I mean, so maybe it doesn't have to be 100 million light years away. Maybe it literally could be, right here. So,
hey man, life finds a way for sure.
Yeah. So it's one of those things I just think is interesting. So I follow some of that crap.
I'm with you. I've been following that since the X-Files, man. I was like 12 years old, dude. Like,
Big fan of the X-Files, man.
12 years old, I'm like, these guys, they got a point.
Yeah. I don't think there's a big government cover-up or anything, but I do think that I think the reason it appears as a cover-up is because they just don't have an answer, so they have to appear that they.
Yeah, what are you going to tell everybody?
Yeah, what are you going to say? Hey, you're not as safe as you think you are, because things can violate our airspace and do whatever the hell it wants, and we can't do anything about it. We don't even know what the hell it is.
Might cause a bit of a panic.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if it was real and they were hostile, we would have been all probed a long time ago.
Yeah.
So whatever it is, if it is something that's not from here, it's more than likely just something that's curious about what the hell's going on, here. And I mean, we send probes all over the place.
Exactly.
Just mechanical probes that somebody else sent out from some other place. And so,
totally feasible for sure.
That's the way I look at it. So it's just one of those cool things that's kind of cool to think about. And, funny story though, Elon Musk put up that string of satellites. And, it flew over Orlando a couple days ago, and my friends were calling me up, "There's UFOs, man. There's UFOs." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" They're like, "There's like 100 lights in a long string." They're like, "I don't know what the fuck it is." And they were like, multiple friends called me about this. And I as soon as they said it, I was like, "Oh man, I bet that satellite system that Elon put is coming over." And I walked outside and it was going over my house, and it was badass. And I was like, "Yeah, that's just that's the I forget the name of that thing, but that's a new it's what, for cell phone, right? Transmission for
cell phone, and I think internet. Like they're doing a beta test on some internet for their satellites.
And get like really remote nations and stuff have access to what it was for. Yeah, I mean it's a pretty cool idea, man, and it's impressive to see when that thing comes over and it looks like a string of pearls going across the night sky. Pretty damn cool.
If you're not plugged into the whole situation, you may think something's going on for sure.
Right. I gotta wonder how many people saw that and thought UFOs. Like
probably a lot.
When it was going over, I was like, man, if friends of mine that are relatively smart and plugged in didn't know that that's what that was, I gotta imagine people that don't pay attention to anything, and a lot of people don't. So.
Yeah, that's true, man.
I don't know. Yeah, man, it was good to be on here, man. This was a good talk. I had fun, especially since you guys are all into the same shit I'm into. That was like extra layer of cool on top of that. I never know, man. When there's a lot of the reptile thing's full of metalheads, so that's the one thing you run into. But other gamers, not so much. Yeah.
I mean, I heard a lot about you beforehand, but then I started I was like, all right, so what business is he involved with? Let me check it out. I go on I'm like, you're sharing like multiple Dillinger escape plan things, like Danzig, like all this stuff. I'm like,
Danzig?
This is weird. Like, what? This is like, I don't know. I don't want to be stereotypical, but you're an older guy, you know what I mean? Like, I expect you to be into more calm down state, you know what I'm saying? Like not into video games and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, this guy, he's breaking the mold here.
I'm never fucking growing up. I pretty much, I'm good with that.
That's awesome, dude.
Escape plan, man. Big fan of them. I love mathcore and
not a lot of people I know are into mathcore, man. Like super experimental stuff like that. Like I guess people grinding their teeth. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, I love the chaos of that, but I like chaos, man. I like shit to be, one of my favorite bands is a band called Every Time I Die. It's another mathcore kind of band, but they tend a little bit more towards the hardcore side of things. But huge fan of that band, and I actually have a tattoo on my arm that's an Every Time I Die quote. Anyway, it's the coin has a said. But I had it done a long time ago. And when I was at the last Tinley show, there was a dude vending next to me that I didn't know. I had never met the guy. His name was Jeff Musial. He's in New Jersey. I forget. I can't say his last name. But anyway, he was next to me vending. And Jeff saw my tattoo, and he's like, "You're into Every Time I Die?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, dude. I'm a huge fan." He takes a picture, and he's like, well, I grew up with those guys, and the lead singer is one of my best friends, and he takes a picture of my arm and sends it to him, and then he shows me back the response of fucking Keith Buckley from Every Time I Die. I saw it, he was like, that's cool as fuck. And they were texting back and forth, and I was like, man, that's badass, dude.
That's awesome.
That's really awesome. Yeah. Yeah, so that was kind of funny. It's like one of those weird little off stories, but.
Are you ever listen to Norma Jean?
No, I've never really heard. I know who they are. They're like one of those Christian hardcore bands or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have never really listened to them. Hardcore. I know they're those similar, right, to Every Time I Die in that kind of vein.
Yeah, they've toured with them and stuff like that. Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know. New stuff lately. I've mostly been listening to. I really got into a lot of like the sludge bands, like I said, like that band Whores, which I think is going to eventually be one of those big up and coming bands. They've only put out one record, and it's ferocious, and it's different than a lot of the stuff that's out there. And they're getting a lot of buzz. They're out of Georgia, and they're part of that scene, so they're really good. I'm a huge Corrosion of Conformity fan from whenever, so I really like thick riffs and shit like that. So
nice.
I don't know, man. I like it all, though. I mean, I follow a shit ton of bands. Huge fan of a lot of them.
And there's a ton of them because they're all like underground, like
That's what all the best shit is, man. By the time it listens to the radio, it's usually. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but. I mean, I was really into Metallica before anybody knew them, and big fan. I used to have to. As a matter of fact, that's kind of funny. So when I got into that stuff, you couldn't really go to the store and buy like Metallica and Slayer shirts and shit like that because they were all in like their first records. So we used to buy white T-shirts and then buy these, the shit the markers that you can draw on shirts with, and make our own freaking metal up your ass shirts and
awesome.
shit like that, man. It was punk as fuck, man. But
I bet
we were really into Venom. Venom was probably the band that really got me into heavy metal. Up until that point, I was into Iron Maiden and stuff like that. All that stuff that early 80s. I never got into the hair band shit because it was so fake, and I just couldn't identify with that party stuff. I was just like, that's
sometimes.
I don't know. I couldn't. I liked the first Motley Crue record. That was more of a punk record than a metal record. And the second one, Shout at the Devil, was pretty good. I was into that. But once they got to Theater of Pain, I was like, all right, you guys lost me. I'm on to this.
Yeah. I agree with you on that.
The first was good, and. I don't know. After that, it turned into a joke, though, with Winger and all that stuff. And I was like, all right. So by then,
I couldn't get down like that.
Huh?
I couldn't get down like that. And
then I got into Misfits and Dead Kennedys and stuff like that, and that was super into all that stuff. And
I'm into that.
Yeah.
I was as not a kid, but like 5th, 8th grade around then, I was really getting into like stuff like Pennywise and getting the internet, and all of a sudden I can start downloading music, and that whole it was kind of mainstream punk, I guess, if you will, like MXPX and all them. And
I like all those bands.
Yeah, man, I really got into a lot of that punk stuff, and Screeching Weasel was like one of those weird. And if you ever got into Le Tigre, that's how you pronounce it. There's some weird punk stuff.
It's a good record that I don't know a lot of people haven't heard of. It's a kind of a super group called Dead Cross. It's Mike Patton from Faith No More, Dave Lombardo from the former Slayer drummer, a couple other guys, and it's like this punk metal kind of crossover thing. It's really strange, but they put out one full album and one EP, and they're good, man. But it's another. Mike Patton just bounces. He's got like 30 bands at this point, between Mr. Bungle and all those other ones.
Mr. Bungle.
But Dead Cross is pretty good. I've been listening to that lately.
All right, man. I'm gonna send you an email for sure.
Yeah, if you're on Facebook too, that's another easy way to get me. Just get me through Facebook. And
Yeah, I sent you a friend request. Somehow we weren't friends yet, but I have quite a few friends on my personal account.
Yeah, and that's the easiest way to get a hold of me too, is through Messenger that way, because email. For some reason, I couldn't get the email thing on Embark Mail.
The Gaboon one, is that a G at the in the? Is it hang on.
In the Embark Mail.
Embark Mail, is that with a Q or a G?
Yeah, it's a Q, and that's what I thought it was. You guys.
I sent it to both.
Yeah, I never got it though, and so but that email address is sometimes the filters or whatever, the connection on this shitty. Gotcha. So it's just easier to get me through my Gmail. But
okay, so that Gmail worked.
Oh yeah, that's the one I use for all my gaming shit. The Gaboon one is one I use for the reptile industry. But
gotcha.
Yeah, okay. It was fun for herpers when you try to give them a Negasonic typed out in both letters, and then people are like, "What the fuck is that?" And I'm like, the song from Monster Magnet that got turned into a comic book from Marvel, and like a super nerd thing.
Ended up in Deadpool 2.
Yeah. And that's what it's from. It was a Monster Magnet song, Negasonic Teenage Warhead. That since Monster Magnet, they've done a lot of comic book songs, over the years. A lot of he's like Dave Windorf's really into comics and shit, and so so Marvel honored them by making a character, and then it ended up in Deadpool, and now people know what that is. But
I love that stuff, man. Like Coheed and Cambria, all the comic book stuff that they do with their songs, man. That's so cool.
Yeah, I like that shit, man. Nerd culture is the shit, man. Now it's like a mainstream thing, but before it was.
Yeah, everybody's trying to catch up now. They're like, "Oh, you nerds, whatever," and now they're like, "Oh, I'm a nerd. Don't worry."
Yeah. Nerds are cool now. All of a sudden,
all a nerd is somebody that's smart enough to read and stays on the head of ahead of the curve. That's it.
Yep.
Everybody else is just fucking around. I mean, like I said, I probably owe the research thing that my mom pushed on me when I was a kid to my success within the business, because she used to take me to the library when I was little. She's like, check out the books you want. So every week we did that. I would check out reptile books and read all those old Ditmars and those books that got a lot of the old timers started.
And being able to hyper focus on a subject is really helpful.
Yeah. In some ways, it does come with some. Man, you asked me to do something with multitasking though, and I'm just like,
yeah, it's tough.
Water. Yeah, if I'm left alone to focus on something, I can do good stuff. But if I have to try to juggle a whole bunch of shit, man, I drop all the balls every fucking time.
I'm with you for sure.
Yeah, that's why once I was able to back off from the business end of it, because I am not a businessman, not by any stretch, and I'm fucking terrible at it. And Heather's like really good. She ran a region for Mayer's Jewelry for a long time, so she's really fucking smart and good at that. So
that's good.
You do all this, and I'll dig dirt in the backyard and make sure that the monitors do their thing. And
that's awesome, man.
Yep. But anyway, guys, this was awesome, man. It was fun.
I had fun too.
Of all of them that I've done in a while, this one was definitely the one that. Hold on a minute. Hey, get off there.
Lace monitor? Yeah.
I'm babysitting Heather's Yorkie while she's out with her parents and her kids tonight. So
it's all good.
Anyway.
I know, man. We'll let you go.
Yeah, we appreciate it. It's been fun. We don't get to find a lot of reptile people that are also into like weird gaming and music. So it's a great time. Like, I don't know if anybody's listening anymore. I don't know if they hopped off, but this is fun. It was fun stuff.
Yeah, it was a blast, guys. Like I said, anytime you want me to come back, you let me know.
Yeah,
I have lots of shit to talk about. Like we only touched on a couple things, and I can talk more in depth about especially if you got a specific subject, you want me to talk about monitors or anoles or whatever, I can do more like that. But
we appreciate it, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and feel free to keep in contact with us,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, feel free to hit me up on Messenger and Facebook and shit. Anytime you guys need anything, just drop me a line there, and I will absolutely respond.
Sounds great. I sent you an email with my number and all that, and we'll keep in contact.
Yeah, sounds good, guys.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, you guys have a good night.
Peace out, man. Thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Ron St. Pierre.